Abandoned or haunted? The creepiest, we're not alone, moments of urban explorers. My friends and I were exploring an abandoned restaurant in this beach town one winter night. We snuck in through a broken window on the shoreside to avoid being spotted by any cars driving by. Overall, inside it was your typical abandoned restaurant, but it was still really cool to check out. There was a long bar, tables tossed about, stuff like that. We walked downstairs into a wine cellar and started walking through the labyrinth of hallways. The basement was deceptively larger than we would have expected for a beachside restaurant. Anyway, we wandered into this room off one of the hallways and we shined our flashlight in the corner, and we see an unmade bed or cot with all of the trappings of someone currently living there. There was a safety razor next to the mirror, some random other belongings. To this day, we still don't know if the person was hiding in the basement with us, waiting for us to leave, or if we stumbled on it while they were out and about. Either way, we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched by someone from the shadows of that basement. I've only been brave enough to do urban exploration once. Well, twice I guess, but the same location both times. To elaborate, near an apartment I used to live in, there was an old hotel that was abandoned and boarded up. One night a friend was over and hanging out with me. We had a few drinks and then, in a moment of inebriated bravado, a little tipsy but not fall-down drunk at all, we decided that exploring the old hotel would be a brilliant idea. The doors were on the outside, so it may have been a motel rather than a hotel. I'm not sure about the difference. The rooms were moldy, dirty, and broken down, but didn't have anything unexpected. There was some graffiti on the walls and some used prophylactics on the ground. Ew, in the rooms. Then we went into the office and lobby area. As we walked in, we froze. There, in the distance, in the darkened lobby, was a man staring at us. He didn't move, just stood there and stared us down. We bolted quickly and ran at a full sprint back to my apartment. Thankfully, the man, homeless or addict or whatever he was, we didn't know, he didn't follow us. A few days later, my friend was back and over during the day. We were talking about the experience with the hotel, and this time, spurred on by daylight, we decided to look in the hotel lobby again. When we entered, the man was still there, standing in the same spot, staring us down, and made of cardboard. We'd gotten freaked out by a cardboard cutout hawking the hotel's website and online bookings. As a man who's had the absolute bejesus scared out of him by a cardboard cutout that someone had placed in his work bathroom more than once, I feel your fear and humiliation. Nothing like that few seconds of terror between turning on the lights and realizing what the demon waiting for you in the dark actually is. I was on the other end of this. There was an abandoned nunnery on the coast behind a suburban development. Very creepy but beautiful place. I loved it because it had an entirely stone chapel. Any sound you made inside had true reverb. An echo a second long, almost. I brought a friend in to make some recordings in the dead of night. As we were leaving, a group of laughing neighborhood kids came in on us crouched in the dark over a bunch of electronics. They ran faster than I've seen anyone run before. Reminds me of something similar a friend and I experienced as well. We were going to explore a supposedly haunted slaughterhouse, which is in fact actually an old grain processing plant. It's about a mile's walk along a paved road. It was nighttime, but the moon was bright enough for us to see without needing lights. We could see 2 cell phone lights of people leaving the spot, walking towards us on the road. Friend and I didn't think too much of it and kept walking down the road. The 2 girls, as it turned out, had their phones mostly pointed on the ground as they walked. That meant they didn't see us until we were probably 10 or so feet away from them. 2 guys walking in the dark towards them in the middle of nowhere at a supposedly haunted location. They screamed bloody frickin' murder. We apologized and told them we're just going to check the place out too. Didn't even cross my mind how creepy that must have seemed to them until we'd already scared the crap out of them. Whoopsie! I guess I should be thankful that this is my creepiest story. So I was at an abandoned medical school in a pretty bad city with my friend. This friend told me homeless people squatted there, but only on the first floor. She even said one of her friends set their backpack down and had it stolen by one of them in plain sight. So we avoided it and explored the second floor. We kept hearing random noises like someone loosely following us, so we kept our guard up, but we never saw anything. We were then in this room and heard a louder noise and looked over to see a cat just chilling. It was the cat following us all along because after stopping to pet it and moving on, it continued following us, making the noises we kept hearing. It eventually came right up to us to be pet. We assumed it was a stray and wanted to get it help. So we agreed that if it followed us out, we'd take it to somewhere or to someone who'd care for it. It followed us outside and then immediately ran from us when we were like, well, guess we've got a cat now. So I went to see where it went, only to see one of the doors to the bando open and this 6-foot+ dude walk out and yell at me, "Y'all screwing with my cat?" I just about crapped myself thinking I was about to be murdered or something. I was like, oh, is that your cat? He followed us out. And he's like, yeah, it's my cat. Colonel Mustard, get over here. And the cat actually comes running to him. He introduced himself and we talked for a bit. He was actually a really cool guy. Said he lived there and studied psychology and stuff to keep occupied. So there's a moderately well-known abandoned mental hospital close to my town. A few months back, a few friends and I went to explore a bit. Not a rare thing for people there. We found this setup of a few folding chairs and a couple of old mattresses with blankets and whatever else you'd imagine on them. We chilled there for about 10 minutes and then went on with our adventure upwards. Pretty uneventful from then on. There were a few really cool graffiti murals, an awesome view from the roof. When we were coming back through, we passed through the room and all of the chairs were folded up and neatly stacked against the wall, and the beds were made, or at least as close to that as it could have been. Whoever did it would most likely have known that we were there and waited for us to leave to do all of that, as it was only a time frame of about 45 minutes. No threats or anything, just an eerie feeling of being watched in an abandoned mental hospital. The area I'm currently in is a touristy beach place, so being winter it's completely devoid of life. There's a lot of apartments and hotels around that are just shells, no windows or doors. At 2 a.m. I went to go to the local garage to grab some smokes as we were running low. It was dead quiet and you could hear the teeniest, tiniest sounds. I was walking past one such building when I felt like I was being watched. I looked up and around, but I couldn't hear or see anything, so I carried on walking, but slower now, trying to be as quiet as possible while listening for anything strange. Then suddenly, every single dog around just went crazy barking. Like we're talking from dead silence to deafening barking in a second. It made me jump 10 feet. I looked up, and on the third floor of the apartment that had no windows or doors put in yet, was a single dog just staring at me. I literally turned around and walked straight back home and figured that I'd just go at a more reasonable time. I've lived in China for the last 18 years. At night, I'd get bored and go out riding my scooter and just explore various roads. This incident was about 14 years ago. There was a place I'd been to in the daytime, down a country road that was mostly green hills and forest. Somewhere, there was a little settlement where they were building a whole bunch of new things, including an apartment building that was at least 20 stories high. It was just a shell, no windows or doors or fittings yet, or even stairs, just the concrete for each floor and some walls. That night I rode past and stopped. There were bamboo ladders leading up to the first few floors and more bamboo ladders inside going all the way up the building. The entire building was filled with people, and they were families too. Mums, dads, cooking pots. They had little fires going and were cooking. Children and even babies. There were hundreds of people living in there, and as I stopped there with the engine running, more and more heads started appearing. People watching me. They were all silent, nobody called out. They just looked. So I rode off again and felt spooked. So I take a lot of time lapses of nature and stuff. One clear night I decided to drive out to the middle of nowhere to get a time lapse of the stars. I found a lake that seemed like a cool spot to shoot and set up. About 20 minutes in, I hear a noise and I look up to see a light above me. Sure enough, a drone is right above me, just hovering. It freaked me out, so I booked it out of there. I later learned that I was trespassing on government property. Haha, you're on a government database now. Somewhat hilariously, you were at least probably put up on a projector in some department's security review, so your face has gained low-level infamy in at least one tiny group of civil servants. Congratulations. There's an old flour mill on Harbor Island in Seattle. It's been abandoned and locked up for a while. My buddies went through a pretty serious urban explorer phase near the end of high school, so we were going to all sorts of weird and interesting places in the area just checking them out. Got chased out by cops a few times, the usual stuff. Anyways, inside this flour mill, we were working through some of the regular block areas, and our buddy swears he hears something. We all stop dead in our tracks, lights pointed down, just listening. The amount of noise a dilapidated building makes when you're trying to be quiet is amazing. Constant creaking and wind noises. Then I start to hear it. It was shuffling, with the sound of somebody dragging something across concrete. At this point, I can hear my heart jumping out of my chest, the blood pulsing in my ears and head, and I'm hyper-aware as I try and pinpoint this sound and associate it with something I knew. By the time we're sure it's not just the wind, we've all heard the noises. There were 5 of us in there, and we're starting to think it's coming from near the stairs. We slowly, achingly creep our way over broken glass and dirt. When we came up on the stairwell, we shined our lights down and up to the adjacent landings for the floor we were on, and we couldn't see anything. My buddy turns around and steps on an old water bottle on the ground, making the loudest crackling a water bottle has ever made in the history of recyclables. One of my other friends, looking back down the factory area we came through, gets startled and yells, "Fudge!" at the sound of the water bottle. We immediately heard the most chilling, deep scream. At that instant, we all just put the gas on and ran the F out of there. At the bottom of the stairwells, we ran into like 10 homeless people who weren't there before, but we paid them no mind and didn't stop our dead sprint until we got back to our cars. We figured it must have been some homeless person we'd scared with our creeping around and then the sudden expletive, but we never saw the person or identified the sound. So who knows? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I live in a big US West Coast city. In a neighborhood where most homes go right up to the sidewalk property line and have a yard in the back, my place is the opposite. The house is at the back of the lot, front yard keeps me buffered from the street noise. It's a nice, dark little oasis in the city. My house has a double door and split door, so the top can open independently of the bottom. I often leave the top open when the weather's nice. So I was sitting on the couch in the living room, all of 15 feet from the door. It's nighttime, I'm reading, and the door's more or less directly in front of me. The porch light's off, the yard's dark, the only light's from the dimmed reading lamp that I'm using. The wind keeps blowing the top part of the door open. Closed, open, and closed. I'm used to it. It happens all the time. It doesn't sound out of place. Until the door kind of misses a beat. I don't hear it thud closed. I look up and it's perfectly still, only open 2 or 3 inches. It was one of those what the frick are my eyes seeing moments. There's like a 15-mile-per-hour wind outside. How is the top part of the door partially open and perfectly still? Then my eyes or brain recognizes it. The outline of a hoodie, drawstrings, hood up, and in that instant I'm frozen and my heart is pounding. Someone is literally standing right there, hood up, holding my door open. I can't see this face, but he sees me noticing because he says, "You should keep your doors locked." Mother frickin' what? Now my adrenaline kicks in, I jump up shouting and he bolts. I get the porch light on in time to see him running out the gate. I still wonder how long he'd been there standing or what the frick he was doing and thinking. That door has been very much frickin' locked since then. A rural experience. A graveyard behind my high school in the middle of the cornfields was a go-to driving around spot because we had nothing else to do as teenagers. Early on in the school year, a lady parked her car in the back of the cemetery and walked into the cornfield and ended her tenure on the planet with the aid of a bullet. The graveyard was super old and on a gravel side road, so nobody noticed for like a week. Kids who were running across country smelled something rancid and they reported it. Once it was investigated, the truth came out and it was weird. She wasn't even from my area. She drove around 2 hours and had no relation to anything around the area. No note was left, it was really bizarre. Anyways, we were driving around months later telling the story to some younger students, really trying to freak them out. But when we turned around the corner to pull into the graveyard, a random car was parked in the back of the yard. We slowly rolled up to it while all of us were losing our minds, only to see a woman sitting up from the back seat, undressed from the waist up, followed by a similarly au naturel man. Awkward, but that was the tightest my butt had been clinched up to that point of my life. I explored part of an old Nike or Atlas missile site one night with a few friends. As we were leaving, someone started shining a laser pointer at us from the woods. Somehow, we couldn't actually see where they were, even though that's usually pretty easy to do with laser pointers. I still wonder if it was just a laser pointer and not a laser sight instead. There was a decommissioned naval base in the town I grew up in. We used to sneak into the old barracks, and one time I turned the corner into the hallway and found a lit cigarette on the ground. There was nobody around from what I could see or hear. We noped the F out pretty shortly after that. I spent 2004 through 2009 living in a dilapidated warehouse that had a space over it converted into an apartment. In exploring the warehouse beneath it before moving in, a buddy of mine and I were discussing how the place smelled and was haunted. In making jokes about it, we started laughing when something shattered on the wall near us. We were seriously startled and contemplating what it could have been when someone shouts, "Shut the frick up!" And there's a homeless man throwing what I assume was a second bottle at us from across the space. In a non-threatening way, I calmly state, "Are you sure you should be in here?" And he waves something at me and yells at me to call the police if I don't like it. So there's this building in my city that's been abandoned for over a decade. The building itself covers over 40 acres, so it's pretty well known by explorers that if the cops come, they won't search for you inside, but they'll wait for you to come out. The second time I went to explore this place, we were looking for a way inside. Keep in mind, this is taking place early in the morning, maybe 3 a.m. We come across this section of the building that was a large outdoor amphitheater. We walked down to the center and went up to the boarded windows, and ever so faintly on the other side of the wood you could hear someone talking to themselves. We got the F out of there. Yeah, you get this kind of early warning of how bad things are about to be later, early on in horror games before the lights go out. Like in Resident Evil Biohazard when you first step into the house and there's gruesome crap all over the place. That's the point where the real-life narrator would have just peaced out, just like the people in this story. No horrifying adventures for this guy. I decided to climb a tree with a friend in the middle of a large college campus at 2 a.m. Sat up there chatting for a while, then a car pulled up and parked nearly right below us. We went silent. One guy gets out, driver stays put with the engine running, 5 minutes passed. A whistle comes from behind a nearby building, and one is returned from the guy below us. A few minutes later, someone walks up. There's a short exchange, we can hear and see everything. The guy walks away and the car leaves. We're silent. 10 minutes pass. We hand-gestured and decided it was time to go. We dropped out of the tree and ran. Technically, those guys should have been the ones feeling not alone, but instead we did for weeks. We were so sure we had been spotted. When I was in high school, my girlfriend lived in Topanga Canyon, which is a pretty bizarre place filled with bizarre people. Well, one night I was leaving her house and I had to walk down the road to get to my car. Road in quotes because most of Topanga's houses are accessed by barely single-lane cracked tar roads with stumps and stuff coming up through them. It was like a 10-minute walk down from the hill to get to my car and get in. It was pitch black. I sat there for a moment and before I turned on my car, I heard a noise. Thinking it was an animal, I didn't move. How am I supposed to know if a bear or mountain lion can break into a 1990 Volvo 240 DL? I hear the noise pass by the car, but I don't see anything. Literally nothing. I freeze. After about 5 minutes, I decided that if it was something dangerous, it would have stopped, right? So I turned on the car. I switch on my headlights and drive the rest of the way down the hill. And that's when I saw them. As I turned onto a wider road, I see two people with black cloth draped over their entire bodies, no shoes, walking slowly down the road in the direction I'm driving. The cloths must have been velvet or similar, because they were pitch black even as my headlights passed across. I gunned it around them and turned onto the main road and watched in my rearview mirror as my tailgate's red colors faded on their forms. I then realized if I'd had left my girlfriend's place about 30 seconds later, I would have literally walked into two people wearing jet black, walking slowly in total darkness in the middle of the night in Topanga. I just got a shiver thinking about that. My friend and I explored an abandoned psych hospital in Suffolk County, Long Island. After checking out the building with the cafeteria and bowling alley, we decided to leave by exiting through the patient room window that we'd entered through. I realized I'd left my flashlight back in an adjacent patient room, so I told my friends that I'd quickly grab it. When I went to the other patient room to retrieve it, I noticed that the door was closed and a light flicker was occurring on the other side of it. I noped out of there so fast. This was back in summer 2012. Every morning my mum used to take me and my brother to our grandparents. While she went to work, my grandparents lived in a really isolated rural zone. Near my grandparents' house, there was a huge abandoned factory, and I'd always wanted to go see what was in there. So I begged my uncle, he lived at my grandparents' house, if we could explore that building. He said yes, so we went to the building and searched for an opening to get inside. Once inside, we started to look around the place, and obviously found nothing except old machines and stuff like that. When we were about to leave, we heard noises coming from upstairs, and then steps. We saw a shadow coming towards us, so we got the frick out of there running. A few days later, I was at my grandparents' house with all of my cousins. Suddenly, the neighbors rang our doorbell and told us that there was someone breaking into our back garden. My uncle went out to check while one of the cousins called 112, the local police number. Soon after the call, my uncle came back inside and told us he saw the guy that had broken in running towards the old abandoned building. I never discovered if the guy in the building and the other in the garden were the same person. It's a pretty messed up story. I was exploring an abandoned rehab near my house with two of my friends and it had just freshly snowed, literally while we were exploring. I was approaching one building there when I looked down and saw a very large set of obviously men's footprints in the snow leading to the building. We continued anyway. We always went prepared to defend ourselves because you never really know, right? And we opened the door to a completely silent, empty building. There was a staircase to a tiny loft, and we went up, only to find that someone had cut a makeshift door in the wall and was presumably just hanging out in the attic. We opened that door too, and there was still nobody. We never saw anyone, but I haven't been back since. It creeped me out far too much. We'd finally worked up the courage to explore this super scary-looking dilapidated house. It was boarded up really solidly. Nobody was getting in or out without a ton of work prying off boards. We searched exhaustively. The easier way in was just to make the damaged drywall on the back wall a little more damaged to widen the hole, we thought. As soon as we stepped in, there was something vaguely human-shaped at the top of the stairs we both saw, and we bolted in terror. Of course, my friend and I were only 9 at the time. It was probably just some homeless dude better at finding entrances than us. As an adult now, I really want to go urban exploring in New York City subways, abandoned stations. But I need to meet someone familiar with all the new post-911 security crap because I'm paranoid about it. An even more exciting target is the abandoned 19th Street Path Station. The only even semi-modern footage is just blurs captured from passing trains, not any better than I can catch myself. But I think their security would be really tough. There's keypads at the front entrances, presumably to disengage some security thing. What happens to cops who arrest other cops, VIPs, or just people who think they're above the law? I policed in a smaller town, about 20,000 people tops, for 8 years. I was a military transplant. I didn't know anyone locally when I was hired. Lots of good old boys and friends of friends that could get away with almost anything. So we had a city councilwoman who believed no parking signs on her street didn't pertain to her. One particular shift at about 2 a.m., out of sheer frustration I guess, I found her truck parked in the street and decided to wake her up and politely ask her to move it. Thank God for body cameras. Next morning at 9 a.m., I was awoken by a phone call from my superior that a formal complaint had been filed for vulgar language and intimidation by same councilwoman. Again, thank God for body cameras. My father had to arrest a retired NYPD officer for a DWI in North Carolina. It was interesting to say the least. He was a jerk. He acted like my father was disrespecting the badge by arresting another officer. Did your dad say anything about, disrespecting the law? I got hit by a drunk driver early in my career. Spent a long time in the hospital and was pensioned off. Thanks for a lifetime of pain, drunk driver. He was back on the road before I got out of traction. So yeah, I always had a thing against drunk drivers when I was a policeman. Found out pretty quick that cops make up a high percentage of offenders in the late 1970s, and I was pretty quickly ostracized after locking a few of those guys up. The local head of the police department here gave himself a ticket recently. He realized he'd parked in the loading zone. He'd just been telling his team how they had to respect laws around parking and zoning. So props to him. I really respect the guy. He also tries to encourage the state government not to increase police funding and instead spend more on social work, early intervention programs for addicts, stuff like that. He says policing is what happens when all other measures have failed. He strongly supports safe substance use rooms, needle supply and disposal programs, detox programs, stuff like that. He's changed his mind on various proposed rules around things like restricting new or probationary drivers from having high-powered cars after examination of the evidence showed that the proposed rule would be ineffective or was not justified by the statistics. We really need more people like him. Holy crap, a principled man. I reckon we're going to get a lot of very concerning stories about gross misuses of power against the few cops that try to be the exception to the ACAB rule here, so I just thought I'd chuck it in once I saw it. Seems like this guy is the standard a lot of the higher-ups in the command should hold themselves to. A friend's father was the commander of the local state police post. He lived by a railroad track that had been out of use for several decades, yet there was still a stop sign at the crossing by his house. Everybody knew this sign was obsolete and nobody stopped for it. He was pulled over by a local town police officer and issued a ticket for running the stop sign. The officer told my friend's father, "Hey, just because you're a state patrolman doesn't give you the right to run this stop sign." A couple of days later, friend's father was going to lunch in his state cruiser and the town officer speeds by him in his town cruiser. State trooper pulls him over and gives him a speeding ticket. Friend's father tells him, "Just because you're a town cop and driving a police car doesn't give you the right to speed and break the law when you're not responding to a call." Yeah, nothing scandalous or anything. It was something basic that I would typically not ticket for. I think failing to stop when entering a public road from a business or something like that. Anyway, the individual immediately pulled out some state law enforcement ID instead of his license. I had to awkwardly tell him to provide the license, insurance, registration, and he went on about his years of service in whatever state. The rest of the stop went as usual, once I could get him to provide the documentation anyway. I ran his information and served him a citation. It drives me crazy when people try to pull a law enforcement officer card. Just be cool. He must have pled guilty and paid it, though, because I had no further involvement. A police officer came into the Home Depot that I work at and tried to return a weed whacker because it didn't work. He was in uniform still. We explained that because A, he didn't have a receipt, and B, the particular model he was trying to return was pretty old, that we don't even sell it anymore and haven't for a while, and that it couldn't be returned. He basically said that he was a cop and we were committing a crime for selling him a faulty weed whacker. He then proceeded to walk over to the garden center, pick up a brand new weed whacker, and walk out the door with it. This is theft. The police were called and we all watched a police officer get arrested. Crazy stuff. A state trooper pulled the cop card when I worked at the depot. He was buying concrete. I started to load a partial pallet in the back of his half-ton truck, and he wanted me to put the full one in, so he only had to make one trip. Your truck can't handle a full pallet, man. I'm a cop. Yeah, you are. So I loaded the full pallet up and watched his truck squat. Sat right down on the tires as soon as he tried to drive off. I didn't help him unload it. That logic, though. Sir, what about physics? I'm a cop. But what about gravity? I'm a cop. My pastor was the police chaplain in our town. He wrote a sheriff's deputy a ticket for parking his cruiser in a no parking zone. It was either a school zone or a fire hydrant, I think. And the guy wasn't parking for police business, so the cop couldn't argue out of it. There was a crap storm from the deputy about how he's a cop and you can't ticket cops. About 3 weeks later, my youth group has a trip to go to bowling in a city the next county over. Well, the D-bag deputy decides to pull a U-turn through the grass median and pull over my pastor with a bunch of us high schoolers in the back. Pulls our pastor out and walks him back to his cruiser to give him a ticket for speeding. To be honest, I'm not sure if the pastor was or wasn't speeding. Our pastor comes back and said he's got a speeding ticket and wonders what the deputy is doing in the next county over. And we're not talking like a stone's throw from the line. We're talking miles over the line where the cop shouldn't be. My town recently had a big stink about our local cops not being where they should be, so that the sheriff's office was doing that too riled up some folks, I can tell you. My father is a cop. He once pulled over his superior for drunk driving. His boss expected special treatment. My dad arrested him. He then ended up leaving the department because he was warned, "If you don't have our backs, then don't expect us to have yours." A kid my sister went to high school with called 911 because his dad was drunk and hitting the mum. The police didn't arrest the dad, but they took him away in the police car, calmed down the mother and made sure she wasn't seriously injured. They then turned to the kid, who was like 15 or 16 years old, and rip into him about how irresponsible he was to call 911 and that his dad would be fired from his job if he got arrested. Then went on about how they'd lose the house and his parents would probably get divorced if his dad lost his job about this. Dad was a police sergeant in the next town over that was well known to the responding officers. I worked as a tribal officer for about 25 years and issued tickets to other officers, correctional officers, and politicians. It didn't matter to me who that person was that I had arrested. I also arrested other cops and ordered my own brother to be arrested. I wasn't the primary officer on scene. The responding officer was trying to be helpful by letting me know so I could take him home. So I was a sergeant at the time and never gave breaks to officers or family members. Nothing ever happened to me. I was threatened, but nothing ever came from it. However, speaking as chief of police was different. When I was being interviewed, I told the tribal council, who did the hiring for the chief position, that I don't play politics. I did my job and got things done. 14 months later, I was told that the tribal council was talking about me, and by the time I got there, I was removed. My appeals process was never followed either. My old criminal justice teacher, who used to be a cop, once told us a story about how he got pulled over by a cop from a different city, but still the same county. He tried telling him he was a cop and showed his badge, but the cop wasn't having it. He got so annoyed that he got out of his car and walked up to the cop writing the ticket and started mouthing off to him, which definitely didn't help. The next couple of months, my teacher's city and the other cop's city got into a ticket war, and they'd write each other tickets if they saw that they were a cop from the other city. So basically, they got into a police ticket war. While on the one hand, it's actually great to see cops holding each other accountable, on the other hand, this is a lot of public resources being misused over a petty squabble. Pretty irritating that this is what all their time and energy was going into. Next up, another example of this grossness. My dad, 29 years CHP, once pulled over a dispatcher for something like expired registration. They tried to worm out of it along the lines of professional courtesy, but Dad wasn't having it and issued the citation. Not long after, my mum got pulled over for speeding at less than 5 over, and here's the officer on the radio confirming her identity. There's a price for principle, which is a shame. The only time I think I've ever pulled over or encountered another law enforcement officer is traffic accident related. An accident I witnessed myself while investigating another accident. Roads were icy and we had about 5 accidents, one after the other. I watched this deputy cause the accident, mostly due to his bald tires. I cited him, I also got called into a neighboring city to investigate a traffic accident where the cop was at fault. Had to cite him as well. That being said, I've been cited by other cops. Recently, I was driving to Vegas and a state trooper got me. I had a firearm in the console next to me and I notified him. Let him know it was right there in view and that I was a cop. He cited me for the full amount over just because I was a cop and should have known better. No argument there. One of our officers got arrested for DUI last year by our neighboring agency, got arrested on a Friday and quit the following Tuesday. Also got called onto the highway to investigate an accident involving a trooper in her patrol vehicle. She'd rear-ended the person in front of her. Watched the dash camera in her car, traffic began to slow, everyone started to skid due to black ice and she bumped the vehicle in front of her. I didn't cite her, but did list her as at fault on the state accident form. I have absolutely written tickets to other cops for several reasons. First, they know better. 2, it's hypocritical. They're doing something they'd write tickets for in their home jurisdiction. And 3, it's disrespectful when they flash their badges or something. They know they're asking me to make an ethical compromise. Now, if they're doing something that I would 50-50 give a warning for to an average person, they're vastly more likely to get a warning. Think 8 to 9 over the limit or a cell phone. And it's the same for dismissible offenses, like no driver's license on their possession. Something that would get dismissed by the court for anyone by law normally. But if it's something that I'd 100% write a ticket for, they're not going to get a warning instead. Some cops are very respectful and will only say something after the stop is over and done with. Some you can tell just because they act slightly out of the ordinary, like they'll address you properly, as trooper, deputy, officer, or put their hands on the wheel, roll all the windows down, stuff like that. Some people try to mention it on the sly, like, "I've got my off-duty weapon with me," being the favorite. Others will literally hang their badge out the window as they come to a stop. I mean, really. This also happens with the military. They'll casually hand their military ID over with their driver's license. Anyway, that's about it. You can tell that some get a bit salty when they realize they're getting a ticket anyway, but none of them have argued to me so far because there's absolutely nothing for them to stand on. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My sister's a cop. She'd give anyone a ticket if they were doing something stupid. She told me she gave a cop from a neighboring town a speeding ticket. He said, "What about professional courtesy?" She said, "That's what I was thinking. Professional courtesy would be not driving 65 in a 35 zone in the town where I work." We have a street racing law in Ontario, Canada that if you're going 50 kilometers an hour over the limit, that they can tow and impound your car without due process. Makes sense with a 40k limit, but less sense at the 100k limit on the highways. I mean, at that point, you're speeding, not racing, as traffic usually moves at 120 to 130 normally. Anyway, cops running a speed trap on the highway snagged an on-duty officer in an unmarked car from a different detachment. They charged her, impounded the car, and then unleashed a crap storm. I was issued a citation once. Coming home from vacation, 10-hour drive, I'd been obeying all the traffic laws, but when we hit my state and then my county, I felt safe and stepped on it. Got lit up with blue lights almost 2 minutes later. I immediately noticed a second officer staying back by the vehicle since it's customary for officers in my area to have their own unit. I figured this guy was a trainee. He identified himself, his agency, and reason for stop. I produced my driver's license, insurance, and registration and politely informed him that I had a weapon in the vehicle. He asked if I had a concealed license, and I said no. That should have led him to ask why I was carrying, and at that point I would have informed him I was an off-duty deputy sheriff. He didn't ask and just said, "Okay," and walked off. 10 minutes later he comes back with a citation. Asked me for my phone number, to write in the citation, and name of my employer. So I said something county sheriff's office, I'm county 45. At this point he asked me why I didn't tell him I was a cop. I told him that it wasn't something I was allowed to do off the bat like that, and I wasn't playing that card. Took my citation and drove off. Got a call not 2 minutes later from his FTO apologizing and asked me to pull over and wait on him. He voided the citation and apologized. There was nothing for him to apologize for, but I did tell him he needed to address the whole "I have a weapon" thing with his rookie. My grandmother was a police officer some time ago, and while not another officer, she ended up arresting a local government official. He'd been drunk driving and crashed his car into multiple other parked cars, streetlights, and finally a building, doing ridiculous amounts of damage, but he was able to walk away and right to jail. After she booked him, in 4-inch heels, I might add, her superiors freaked the F out and demanded she release him because of who he was. If I recall correctly, she told them that they'd have to do it themselves. Pretty sure all the charges were wiped and he went home that night. She quit shortly after the incident. Before that, she was in the Navy. After law enforcement, she became a trauma nurse, and now she's very happily retired. Huh. Yuck. Look, there should be a certain egregious level of crime that nobody's immune to, and causing several tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage should be included in that list. Cops are meant to protect society from dangers like this inebriated maniac, and he should have been beholden to the same laws that would apply to a poorer person who slightly dinged someone's vehicle. Gross. My wife is a trooper. She was driving to work one morning with the cruiser as she was double-backing shifts. On the highway, a car comes flying up behind her and then decides to pass her and a bunch of other cars at a high enough speed that she decides to pull them over. Never pass the highway pace car, kids. Guy pulls over, she does all the normal cop stuff and then gets out and starts walking up. She notices the guy hanging something out the window at her, walks closer and sees it's a badge. She acknowledged the guy, asked for license, registration, insurance, and he keeps pointing the badge at her. She asks again for his info. He shows her the badge harder, which just annoyed her more. She acknowledges the badge, asks again for his info. He finally relented and gave it over. She wrote him a ticket. He goes to work to his tiny local station and complains to his boss about the witch trooper who had pulled him over and gave him attitude. His boss calls her boss. Her boss sends his boss the recording of the stop. He's no longer an officer now and is now a security guard at a hospital. I have a feeling his boss was looking for any reason to get rid of him. You know, I did have this encounter with a cop that ended with him being arrested. I was living in a fairly weapon-friendly state, Pennsylvania. Carry permits were not required for a sidearm unless you were carrying one concealed, including transporting one in the cabin of your car. I had one for work. My background was as an insurance adjuster. I found myself, for a time, doing insurance fraud investigation for a private investigator. After an incredibly overzealous neighbor decided to assert dominance over the parking spot in front of his house by smashing my windshield with a baseball bat, I was in the car and I was watching someone a block away that had nothing to do with this clown. It was decided that I'd be carrying from then on. After a very long day of surveillance that started at 4 a.m., I stopped by the gas station at the end of my block to fill up the tank and get some snacks before tucking in for the night. I had a rare full weekend off and I was itching to get home. As I was paying, I must have shifted my coat to where the guy behind in line saw that I had my piece holstered on my hip. He interrupts my transaction to demand to know if I have a carry permit. I tell the stranger to mind his own business and I continue paying. Concerned stranger pulls out a badge and tells me that he's a municipal officer of a small town about 10 miles away. He again demands my permit and ID. I observe that we're not in said small town 10 miles away, and therefore, here in a larger town beneath our feet, he's just a regular citizen. He informs me that I'm not to leave as I'm being detained. He's calling the city police and I'm in deep doo-doo. His words for resisting. I just want to get my beef jerky, chips, and Mountain Dew home. But okay, apparently we're doing this. City police arrived within about 10 minutes. They separate us. The city cop asks me about the weapon. Do you have a permit? Yep, here it is. I'm also an insurance adjuster and I just got off work. I hand him the permit, my employer's ID card, and the badge issued by the county in that state. The cop is super chill. He goes back to his car, comes back a few minutes later, and hands me everything. He thanks me for not being a jerk. All the while, Barney Fife is being a complete moron and is making demands of the city cops. This guy basically wanted me charged with everything shy of murder, and they weren't complying because, well, I hadn't broken any laws. Apparently, when he wouldn't show some stranger his ID didn't work, he decided to back up his game by telling the cop that I looked like I was about to rob the store and was just going for my weapon when he stopped me. Now, this was a special kind of stupid move for a few reasons. Not the least of which being that there were witnesses to him being a butthole and it was a convenience store with surveillance cameras. It didn't rise to that level, however, as a quick conversation with the clerk indicated he was full of crap. So I was about to head out when one of them says to him, "You know, I wasn't aware that Town X had its own police department. When did you start there?" Well, I'm actually the town constable, but if you read the state constitution, that allows me to serve as the chief law enforcement officer of the town where I'm elected. All kinds of nope. Cop cuts him off and tells him to put his hands behind his back. To my dying days, I think my happiest memory may be recalling the look of confused horror on his face when he realized that these cops weren't going to comply with his little arrest fantasy and that he was going to jail. Constables are elected, and they do have peace officer status, but they also seem to have a serious issue with overstepping their authority in that particular state. Okay, so this wasn't a cop, but I will say as someone intimately familiar with these people who get drunk off their tiny amounts of power that this is hilariously satisfying. What a moron. Prepared to lie about an innocent man to get to take part in an arrest as well. Get bent. I ticketed an air marshal one time, not a police officer, but still within law enforcement. He was going 65 in a 35 zone. He was about to hit a 25 zone right by our elementary school and showed no signs of slowing down. I happened to be driving out to take a report and saw him flying into town and flipped on the radar. I was no longer working traffic at the time, but that was way too fast heading into town, so I flipped around and pulled him over. As I approached his convertible, the music was blaring and he did not bother to turn it down. When I instructed him to do so, he flashed his ID as if that explained everything. He seemed shocked that I insisted he turn his music down and requested his driver's license and registration. He explained, while still holding up his ID, that he was a federal air marshal and didn't have time to chit-chat. I smiled and informed him he should have thought about that before he went flying through town at 65. I added that he could speed the process up by providing me with the documentation I requested. After some grumping, he finally produced said information. I wrote him a ticket. The attitude cost him any chance of me taking it easy on him. If he was shocked when I made him give me his license and insurance, he was doubly shocked when I produced the ticket and told him his court date. Generally speaking, I hate giving traffic citations, but sometimes it can be enjoyable. I had a message waiting for me in a few hours when I swung back to fill out some paperwork. His supervisor had called and wanted to give me a chance to explain myself before he called the assistant chief to report my behavior. I offered to bring the chief, who was in the office that evening, onto the phone for him so he could discuss. He declined. After he dropped the huff and puff, we discussed the citation. I walked him through the traffic stop and the behavior of his subordinate. He apologized for wasting my time. He let slip this individual was a bit of a hothead, so the behavior was not really surprising, though it was unacceptable. The air marshal called back the next day and apologized for his behavior in a voicemail. Then he showed up in court a month later to fight the citation. I mentioned to the city attorney that I still had his voicemail apology, which included him admitting he was driving way too fast. The city attorney passed that information along, he paid the ticket, and we all went about the rest of our lives. Ladies, what is something that guys don't actually need to feel insecure about? Oh, liking cats, especially kittens. Why do some guys get their boxes in a twist about cooing over animals that are objectively cute and lovable? Chill out and pet the damn cat. Their bum. You know, I wish you'd said this 3 months ago. Now what am I supposed to do with this bubble butt? Singing. I love when I'm at a chill pizza joint and the cooks in the kitchen are singing. It doesn't even matter if they're not great singers. I love when people are happy enough to sing. Guys aren't there to protect and be a shoulder to cry on. They need love and affection as well as we women. It's totally okay to need a safe place now and then just to talk. You don't have to be emotionless. We don't need strong hands wrapped around us. We can hold hands and walk side by side. Your height and muscle weight is not as relevant as some toxic people may make you think it is. When they arrive, as in the bedroom sense, quickly. I am honored, sir. I would never judge someone for that because I know it's not in their control. But I also definitely don't expect it to mean that the doing of the deed is over. It's okay to not be the smartest person in the room. Admitting that you don't know or understand a thing does not make you look weak. Blustering your way through makes you seem like an arrogant idiot. Admitting that you don't know something already makes you smarter than average. Being vocal when they arrive. I've seen so many guys just hold their breath and try to choke off any sound that might come out of their throat when they arrive. And I'm just a little sad, like, what are you afraid of? I want to know that you're having fun. I want to know you enjoy what's happening. Be loud about it. Screw the neighbors. Some friends of mine are really insecure about not being able to grow a beard. To be honest, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, at some point, those of us unable to grow a beard, narrator included, just have to accept and love our little scrubby teenage faces the way they are. And honestly, could be worse. There are some guys who look great with a beard, but who definitely shouldn't not have one. They've got to keep those things through summer, and I feel sorry for them. You don't need to worry about appearing feminine over certain stupid things, like thinking a puppy is cute, or wearing pink, or being generally friendly and smiley. Women like that stuff and get annoyed and exhausted by men who take masculinity too far. I didn't realize some people think that thinking a puppy is cute was feminine. No regrets. I want to hug and pet all the puppies I can. I do baby talk with the puppies even though I don't want kids. The flip side of the comments about not being able to grow a beard. Guys shouldn't feel insecure about being hairy. Yeah, that includes hairy butts, backs, legs, and shoulders. I love me a hairy chest, and I don't find a hairy back or shoulders to be a problem. I think the only thing I might ask someone to trim would be crazy nose hair, though that could be disguised by a good mustache. Like most things listed here, yeah, you'll find women who won't like it, but if they're willing to write you off for something physical that's out of your control, they're probably not the person for you. I will say, regardless of anything else, hygiene is also important. If you're hairy, you might sweat more depending on the climate and how warm you run. But if you shower regularly and keep everything clean, it's all good. I wonder how many guys came in to look at the other comments here, hoping to hear someone say, sausage size. Crying. Men crying is my kryptonite. It just makes me want to love them and hold them forever. It can be so difficult to do. I didn't cry for probably 10 years due to getting told my entire life that men don't cry, suck it up, princess, by just about every other man in my life. After 2 years of allowing myself to feel, the one thing that broke my crying dry streak was my cat dying. That was the only thing in 10 years that managed to move me to tears. Thankfully, I'm getting better at it. Balding. So many guys try to hide it or even get plugs or constantly wear hats. Just keep the size cut close, like buzzed or shaved, and most women will actually think it's pretty attractive. A friend of mine shows signs of balding already. He seems pretty confident about it, saying at one point that he's just going to shave it all. Honestly, his confidence is attractive. No matter what the hair looks like, confidence makes all the difference. Don't feel insecure about liking girly things. Order that fruity drink, watch that rom-com, and sing in the shower. A lot less people care than you might realize. A good example is actually happening right now. I'm at a pool party. There's 2 very nice, overweight guys who are in the pool, but they're both wearing t-shirts to cover their guts and just standing around. Then there's a third heavy-set guy who easily has an extra 40 pounds on the other 2. He's shirtless and having the time of his life playing with abandon in the pool basketball game and cracking jokes. He's way more attractive to the girls because he isn't ashamed of his body and he exudes confidence. Should all 3 of them lose weight? I mean, sure, most of us should. But don't stop having fun because you're ashamed of yourself. Live your life and have fun. That's very attractive to all people. Just my opinion. I'm a middle-aged woman and I think I have a bit of wisdom about things like this. I've seen some crap. Ha! They should stop feeling insecure about showing emotion, especially in a relationship. I know a lot of guys grew up being told that showing emotion was girly, but honestly, when a guy is open about how he's feeling and doesn't suppress it, it makes everyone feel more secure. When the girl feels like she's the only one who has real feelings in the relationship, then it's hard to trust the guy, and the guy often feels misunderstood as he isn't conveying what he wants to. Guys, please know it's okay to be emotional. You deserve to be honest with the people around you, and it makes relationships so much better for everyone involved. Being too skinny. As a formerly skinny guy, unless you have reasonable eating habits, it won't last. Word of warning to guys in your teens and early 20s who are insecure about being skinny: if you can eat a ton and never gain weight, chances are you won't always be skinny. You'll have the opposite problem later. Sausage size and their body weight. I understand some people might think this is a lie, but I personally think so as a woman because size is not what determines how good bedroom fun times are. Some may have a preference, but with 7 billion people in this world, I think preferences are diverse. Plus, women have different size equipment down there as well. Many people forget that. As for weight, you should love your body. Confidence is attractive. It should only be put to concern if your health is affected by it. Also, this is of course my opinion. It's not a lie because this is genuinely how I think. I know there are people out there who can agree, while others may not. Don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard a lot of guys are insecure or care a lot about their hair. One of my guy friends once told me that he spends a good 15 minutes in the morning styling so that it looks okay. Honestly, I don't really notice a guy's hair unless it's drastically different from everyone else's. Like, buzz cut, super long, or just some wild hair. I've had a lot of guy friends who are really insecure about their pimples or acne. I'll tell them that everyone gets them and everyone is insecure about it, but their response is usually something like, "Girls have makeup to hide it." And so I taught a few of them how to subtly put on concealer so they could feel more confident. Felt good. Guys shouldn't feel so insecure about their body shape. You don't have to have big biceps or washboard abs in order for a girl to like you. Haha, and some of us who do have those things still couldn't land a woman while we were single most of the time. Confidence, fellas, it's all confidence. Like I've said, I've had more partners at times of my life where I was feeling good about myself than when I was in tip-top shape. I'm a guy, I'm just here for the self-esteem boost. Guys shouldn't feel insecure about stereotypical masculine standards. You want to do handicrafts like sew or crochet or scrapbook? Great, we can do it together. I suck at those things as a woman though, so the farthest I'll probably get is watching YouTube tutorials with ya. You can wear cute things and accessories like scarves and handbags. Heck, you can borrow mine. If you need some time to unload emotionally with a bubble bath or a one-on-one afternoon tea about whatever jerk you encountered a couple of days ago, it doesn't mean you're weak or unreliable. It means that you know how to handle your emotions in a controlled and healthy way. Moobs. You know, I've had a bulgy chest for the longest time. I've been trying so hard to lose weight and I'm making some progress, but I really won't feel confident until my stupid tatas stop poking out. And they're still poking out. Makes me hate taking pictures of myself in certain lighting. Guys should not worry so much that they can't solve a Rubik's Cube puzzle. Although it's mostly rare, a few chicks have dated guys who can't solve it. Eggplant size. Anything above 8 inches is probably uncomfortable for the old hole. Larger not necessarily meaning better goes for girth as well. Don't feel insecure about showing your feminine side or of being emotional or sharing any interests or beliefs that may not be considered manly. Seriously, I love a guy who's confident enough with himself to be open and different. Until the rest of society deems it okay for men to be like that, expect it to be hard to find a man who does that. Some women may want that, but why would they feel comfortable when the rest of society is telling them that the best way is to conform to the usual standards? Height. I know the popular presumption is that anyone under 6 feet is screwed, but if a girl considers a couple of inches to be a deal breaker, she's not worth your time anyway. I'm short, but lots of my tall and beautiful friends have dated men somewhat quite a bit shorter than them. It's no big deal. And to all the guys snarking about how the above isn't true, I promise you that kind of crappy attitude is way more unattractive than any physical characteristic. And if the only woman you ever want truly all diss you for your height, well, I'd look inwardly about your own tastes as well. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Don't feel insecure about the size of your Johnson. It really is about what you do with it, and honestly, guys with big uns are just painful most of the time. A lot of them also just fall back on the size of their member as an excuse to be kind of bad in bed. Don't be worried about your body hair, being too hairy or not having enough hair. If someone isn't into you because your hair isn't Goldilocks just right, then they aren't really worth the time to get into a relationship with. If she's complaining when she meets you that you don't have enough hair, or have too much hair, or don't have hair in the places she wants, and have hair in the places she doesn't, what's it going to be like 10 years down the road? Don't worry about having a gym body. It's much better to just be healthy, and a lot of the guys with massive muscles just aren't. Also, a lot of them just put stress on the women they're with to be as built as they are. As well, what appeals to the eye is not also the same as what appeals to the other senses. For that matter, what appeals to the eye isn't always huge muscles and a little fat. That's just a part of the media pressure that's telling all women they should look just like Kim Kardashian. Then there's money. Just the same as the gym body. Financial success is one element women may look at, but it's usually just one of very many. Back to the idea of hair, if she's just looking at your financial success, what's it going to be like in 10 years if you lose your job? If you wouldn't hold a woman to the same standard, don't feel like you should have to live up to that for her. Your relationship should be about equality and actually sharing your life, even if you're just looking at short term. That Saturday night is a chunk of your life. If you're not getting something from it, if you're just living up to her standards, then it isn't worth your time. Being macho or acting strong all the time is not that important to most women. It's one of those pressures society puts on you. It's okay to say you're scared. It's okay to say you're depressed. It's okay not to fight someone just because they're trying to insult you in public. It's okay to just be a person. If you like video games and eating pizza on the weekend, it's not okay for someone to tell you that's wrong. There are women out there that would be like, cool, hand me a slice and the second controller. You're not automatically in the wrong because a woman wants something different. The things a lot of women are saying in this thread are nice, but that's just it. They're nice words. A lot of women do care about Johnson length or height, and they find it weird that when men show emotion. Real life is different than your fantasies, people. Well, that's the thing that makes me vastly unhappy, to be honest. There are internet forums just like this, but about what guys think about girls, and I feel the same way. But when it comes to this, I honestly don't care about height or showing emotions or the size of your eggplant. But for a lot of people, things like that do matter, which is why everyone's insecure. I know many women who think similarly. Most of our insecurities come from our own heads or social media saying there's a right and wrong way. I know sometimes it's hard to believe people find you attractive, but the truth is a lot of people do. You just haven't found many of them yet. Not being able to grow a beard. A lot of us prefer if a guy doesn't have a beard. Receding hairlines. They don't look so bad. Toupees and comb-overs, though, look terrible. Just rock whatever you have. And short guys, don't make up for your height with extra macho or big hair. You're just as hot as tall guys if you have confidence, without arrogance. First, back hair. It's hair, it's fine. 2, having a belly instead of abs. It's just more comfortable anyway. 3, not having huge arms. See above. 4, not having a massive member. I found it's more of a hindrance, especially if they don't know how to use it. And 5, crying or having emotions in general. We like that. You don't have to be super tough, macho, or masculine all the time. Just be yourself. Guys, you aren't nerds or neckbeards if you play video games. I don't know about other females, but I love them, and the decent ones don't mind. Oh, I've got one more. Dad bods. A lot of guys are insecure because they aren't all muscle and toned and don't have a six-pack. Dad bods are actually really nice. I'd rather cuddle with someone who feels human than someone who feels like a rock. You know, muscles don't feel hard when they're relaxed. I will concede this last person's point to the contrary. Muscles are actually very comfortable to lie on when they aren't being used or flexed, and big pecs are actually very comfortable. This is brought to you by the straight male narrator who has admittedly only limited time laying his head on other men's chests. Probably being super masculine. I understand some girls like to have a big buff boyfriend, but seriously guys, don't worry about it too much. Crying, especially in front of someone that you trust. I guess, in general, opening up to people. Please don't disrespect your luscious, long hair. Look, go to the gym all you want, dip into psychology, do what you want to do to improve yourself as a human being. Just leave your frickin' hair alone if you prefer your long hair. Nothing makes my heart beat faster than a man who embraces his long, natural hair. I swear, I get heart palpitations. Your feminine side or your height. A lot of people don't care about height, and a lot of women like when a man can be feminine, the same as when guys like girls that can be tomboyish. Starbucks barista. Don't be ashamed of your drink. Pink drink, frappuccino, chai tea, they're delicious, and we want you to have a tasty drink. Being insecure. Are you having a bad day? Tell me. You don't feel hot? Tell me, I'll be your hype man. And knowing that I'm wrong. I know some guys who don't like to correct their girlfriend or wife, but please tell me if I'm wrong. Not saying it to embarrass me and leave me humiliated, just let me know. Thank you for that. Some of us really just need a hype man. Also, what are you, some sort of sensible person? I'm not generalizing, I know most women aren't like this, but I spend so much time around these people I sometimes forget that not everyone is like that. I work with a group of incredibly toxic women. Everyone who's been hired in the last 2 years has quit because of the 4 same girls. You can't correct them, they just get mad. If you're a man and you call in, then you need to grow a pair, but if you're a woman, oh, then take as much time as you need, honey. If you're new, they'll call you out for doing something wrong, but will barely try to explain how to fix it. Worst of all, they talk crap about everyone. They'll talk crap about you while you're in the room, and when you say something, they act like you insulted them. Some people get really up in arms about men calling women the B-word, but sometimes B-words can be B-words. I kind of went off on a rant here, sorry about that, I just needed to tell someone about the crap going down in my office. Showing feelings and being emotional. Also, moaning in bed. Oh, the moans. When I'm doing things right, my husband will cut loose and I love it. Balding or hair loss. Most of you will lose your hair. A good chunk of you will start losing it in your 20s. You're just as attractive as you were before. You are more than your hair. Showing emotions. Over the years, I found it way harder to handle no or rarely any shown emotion from male friends or boyfriends. You know, stuff like crying. Often, I'd rather see a guy cry than seeming to be emotionless. A lot of my guy friends will rant about something or be upset, but then backtrack and say, sorry, I was overreacting. You're entitled to your emotions, no matter what gender you are. I wish my boyfriend would believe me when I tell him it's okay if he doesn't get me there every time we have fun in the bedroom together. I still enjoy it all the same. Every time I see these comments, you all convince me I'm supposed to be swimming in women, but I'm not. Basically, anything you can't control. If anyone tries to shame you for your height, hair, beard, or no beard, or Johnson size, they're complete idiots and not worth your time. But also, being skinny. I see a lot of body shaming towards guys about that, and it actually breaks my heart. You don't have to be muscular or big or anything. So many girls like slender men. But not slender man, he's scary. Not being able to do the Fortnite dance. Don't ask. From what I gather in all these top comments, a guy who has a short Johnson, hairless face with acne all over, weighs 110 pounds, is 5 foot, and dumb as a bag of rocks shouldn't feel at all like they have attributes that can be improved. Lies. I believe you have wildly misinterpreted the purpose of this post. It's more or less for being okay with who you are. There are some things like downstairs size and height and hairline that you can't control and you shouldn't bother feeling insecure about. Their height. If Danny DeVito can be the hot thing that he is at his stature, then so can you. I mean, it helps that he has a magnum dong. Their stomachs. My brothers, nephew, and dad almost always refuse to get into a public pool or body of water without a shirt because they're a little heavier than some of the guys. The first time we took our nephew to the pool, he started crying when we told him to take his shirt off because he was embarrassed about it. I know that I personally don't give a rat's butt about a guy's stomach, along with most other people I know. Laughs in bright red stretch marks. The inability to grow facial hair. My husband has a mean beard. He gets a lot of guys complimenting it, and they'll tell him how insecure they are about not being able to grow anything. He always says to them, well, you wish you had one, but I wish I looked as good as you without one. Gets them in the feels a couple of times. That's how bad some people want it. Oh, and guys shouldn't be afraid of compliments from each other. It doesn't make you gay or feminine. Well, the compliment one is actually new in this grouping, but yes, apart from that, we do seem to be reaching the limits of this topic. In short, don't be worried about your weight, hair, eggplant size, or sensitivity. Just do what you think works best for you without masking it, and if you work on making yourself happy in your other pursuits, you'll probably be more confident and attractive in any case. Height. If a girl wouldn't date you for your height, you're better off without them. Also, facial hair. I'm here to get my confidence boosted. Anyone else? They shouldn't feel insecure about their preferences. They like what they like. Skin tone, body type, hair. We like what we like and we can't change that. And all this goes for girls as well. The duration of the deed. We get it. Sometimes things get superheated and it ends quicker than you'd like. Firstly, sometimes it's flattering, but secondly, we really don't mind. Just talk to your partner or go for round 2. Or better yet, help your partner out in the meantime. Wink. Seriously, the biggest killer of mood is being a neurotic, uptight butthole. If you're nice, charming, clean, adventurous, respectful, confident, non-judgmental, and mature, you'll have more fun and better, more meaningful relationships than if you try to be Mr. Gigolo Romeo. Sweat. My boyfriend was so insecure about his sweat, he went out of his way to stay dry, wear strong deodorants, stuff like that. Newsflash, you guys look and smell awesome when you're crusty dusty. Please do not confuse crusty dusty with a lack of hygiene though. Smelling today's scent is definitely not the same as smelling a week's worth of stank. Surgeons. What's the weirdest thing you've had to remove from someone's butt? I was the patient's family doctor, and took care of him in the family hospital for his short stay after. He had a cue ball get stuck up there. Not sure exactly what he thought would be the way to get out of it. We had a lot of trouble getting it out too. The conversation of the surgeons trying to come up with a way to get it out was pretty hilarious. Hello folks, early commentary from the narrator here. I've often reflected in our medical videos that they seem to be like 1/3 people just shoving things up there and pretending that they tripped and fell on them, and then I saw this entire topic and I just thought, oh boy. And there are a lot of potential answers to choose from. Enjoy and prepare to feel a lot of sympathetic pain. ER doctor here. As a veteran on the job, it becomes hard to distinguish what is weird anymore, so judge for yourselves. 3 lemons, about a foot of a broom handle, a light bulb, which did not survive its adventure, so many toilet brushes, inserted brush and handle first, a series of toothpicks, any number of bottles, aerosol cans, stuff like that. And my favorite one was a simple, regular marital aid. We x-rayed it, and the radiologist's report read, there is an approximately 15-centimeter cylindrical foreign body in the large intestine extending proximally from the rectum. Judging by the indistinct outline of the foreign body, I suspect it is still turned on. Had a guy come in with a capped section of PVC pipe filled with mercury because he liked the sloshing when he'd jerk in his turkin. Had to call hazmat, and security also had to be called when he became violent because they wouldn't give the mercury-laden pipe back. ER nurse. I've seen baseballs, loads of the actual correct toys for the insertion, cans of soda, and vegetables. There should be a public service announcement about using those marital aids in the butt. It needs to have the jewels, or just some sort of base so that it doesn't get lost up there. Women's toys don't need them, as there's only so far up that they'll go. A doctor I worked with once told a man, it's okay if you want to put things up your butt, you just have to use the right things. an enormous silicone butt plug which broke off at its base inside the patient. It was shaped like a soft cone on a stalk with the base at the bottom. Had to remove it in pieces. Also an Orangina bottle 2 years before this butt plug. Would you have grounds for compensation or suing if a actual purpose-built toy broke like that? I'm not gonna buy one, rip off the base, and pop it in myself, for those wondering. I'm just imagining this happening between a couple and the first moments and facial expressions of the plugger and pluggee, the latter staring at the plugless base in their hand. Oh, so many questions. A friend of mine is a surgery resident, and during one of her trauma shifts, an addict walked in with an incandescent light bulb in his rear end. It was shoved in with the wide part first. They were dilating the rectum in an attempt to remove it, and the resident in charge of the procedure managed to accidentally separate the metal base from the glass globe, which immediately shattered under the pressure of the colon. They had to perform a partial colectomy to resolve the complication. Crystal is one hell of a substance. A foreign body per rectum is a fairly common occurrence. In my time rotating in the ER, the most common things have been yucca roots, avocados, shampoo bottles, and a few other things. But that light bulb story is still unmatched. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen the X-ray. I am a veterinarian. The plastic baggies that people use to clean up after their pets on walks. They unspooled in his gut and spread from stomach to colon. His owners realized what had happened when he started pooping out bags and brought him to the ER. My coworker went in to cut him, and the scene she described was hilarious. He would intermittently strain a little and poop out a little section of bags. Someone would tear them off, and he'd be okay for a bit and then poop out some more. Like he was dispensing them for himself. He was fine after surgery. When I worked in the ER, we had a guy come in with a 6-battery mag light stuck up Main Street. The funny part is that it was inserted bulb out and it was turned on. So he laid him down prone and the doctor spread his cheeks and then the room lit up like he just cracked open Marcellus Wallace's briefcase. Back when I was an ER tech, we had this guy come in with a full-size bottle of VO5 shampoo up his butt. Of course he said he fell on it in the shower. You could clearly see it on the X-ray. It was pretty spectacular. The best part was he knew exactly what needed to be done to get it out, suggesting this wasn't the first time. He asked for conscious sedation and for someone to pull it out. Well, the ER doctor tried that, and then tried manually to get it out with forceps, and was essentially elbow deep in this guy. But he couldn't get it. He had to go into the operating room to get it taken out. I bumped into the surgeon a few days later and asked him how it went. He joked to me that, after we knocked him out, I grabbed a plunger out of the bathroom and got it out that way. But then he told me all he had to do was stick some suction cup up there till he felt it connect and then slowly pull it out. According to the surgeon, this guy never presented any sort of identification or insurance card and demanded to pay his entire bill before he left. Usually it takes some time for bills to get finalized. He paid it completely in cash and then left via a taxi. You know, I'd be more interested in what non-medical people have had to help people remove from their butts. My cat swallowed dental floss and I had to pull it out of her butt. I'm not a medical professional, just a grossed-out lady with a new lidded trash bin. Not my story, but my friend is a radiographer. A guy came into the hospital with Barbie dolls up his butt. After scans, one came out without too much issue, but the other one was way too far up there. They were worried that if it was pulled out, its arms would open and puncture the bowel. So they scheduled surgery, the X-ray staff waiting excitedly for news. The surgeon then returned and with a serious voice announced, "We found Ken." My nurse wife told me that a man had an apple removed from his butt, but I never understood how this could be possible. I often think about this, but I've never asked for more details. I'll ask her over the table at Christmas dinner though. Okay, disappointing update. I didn't ask her at the Christmas table. There were small children around and everyone was having a nice time, and it didn't seem cool to just bring it up. Also, no one else started any butt stuff related conversations, providing an opening for my inquiry. I asked her today, but also told her about my story on here. She didn't feel comfortable sharing the details with you guys, so I guess you'll just have to use your imagination. Someone posted about a similar situation and suggested they'd possibly worked with my wife. However, based on the specific details in their post, I'm sure it was a separate apple or butt-related incident. Oh, and you can safely get things bigger than an apple in a butthole, by the way. Your rectum is pretty stretchy if you go slow. Yes, as we've had pointed out in one of our videos lately, you can apparently fit 2 small raccoons up there, which is a great testament to the flexibility of that orifice, but also a horrifying prospect. Fingers crossed that nobody here has managed that. Wowie wowie, do I know a lot of cases involving falling on things and other such excuses. Here are just some of the things that I know. A Buzz Lightyear action figure? A Barbie doll? Plaster of Paris? They wanted a mold of his colon. Instead, it had to be cut open as it was glued shut by the plaster. Glasses, the sight kind. Jewelry, mostly necklaces. A cucumber which, after proclaiming he fell over in the garden naked and landed on his cucumber patch, still had the Tesco wrapper on it. And finally, a light bulb. Finally, on a rather dark note, if you're a fool who slipped something up their black hole, because the butt just sucks things in disturbingly well, and you can't retrieve it, please, for the love of God, go to your doctor. People have died due to the toxic shock due to this crap. A guy here died of it in 2 weeks due to having a marital aid stuck up there and never went to his doctor. Your pride can recover, but you can't recover from death. Not me, but a good friend I've known since 6th grade who's an emergency room doctor. Straight couple in their early 20s were using a vibrating toy on her. Then they switched positions, he said it was his first time, and they had lubricant everywhere, and the slim 6-inch vibrating toy disappeared all the way up in him while it was still on. They waited and tried to get it out on their own and finally went into the ER. They were going to wait until the batteries died, but it was getting real late. My buddy tried to get it out, but he couldn't. He told the guy that they might have to do surgery to get it. The guy asks my buddy, if he has to go into surgery, can my buddy please call his mum and tell her? My buddy laughs and says, "You're 22. You get to call your mum and tell her you have a buzzing, vibrating toy in your butt that might be perforating your colon." Then my buddy remembers a guy he went to medical school with who works in the same hospital. He has freaky long fingers like E.T. that might work. The other doctor gloves up and gets the thing out, still buzzing. Just an FYI, it is really easy for this to happen, so limit the lubricant on your hands. Your colon gets like a suction thing in it and things go in easy like what happened to these guys. A homeless woman, frequent flyer and substance user came in to see us with abdominal pain. The X-ray revealed 17 oval-shaped objects in her downstairs space. They were removed by a very diligent medical resident armed with a speculum and McGill forceps, with the aid of an ultrasound tech. 17 Barbie doll heads. Their removal was made a bit easier by their long hair. There was also the man with the small fluorescent bulb in his rectum. He insisted on the doctor in the ER just pulling it out and sending him on his way. But those bulbs break very easily, lacerated colon, and they're full of toxic chemicals, like poisoning. Surgical removal was recommended, but he flatly refused because, hey, what would he tell his wife? He signed out AMA and we never saw him again. Son of a doctor here. My dad removed an entire peeled sweet potato from someone's colon once. The guy swore that he had just slipped and fallen on it. We received a patient with horrible pain that felt like constipation. He couldn't go number 2 and laxatives weren't helping. We soon found out that the blockage wasn't just constipation, it was a string of beads several meters long that had become tangled into an ugly ball inside him. I had to snip it apart and carefully pull pieces of it out. When most of it was out, his butt became a rocket engine with diarrhea as the propellant. Does this mean that you're a rocket surgeon now? Please, Doc, you've got to help me. Something's wrong with me, but I'm sure the dozens of butt beads that I crammed up my butt have nothing to do with it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've seen a small-size Fanta orange soda can get pulled straight out of a man's butt. Did you drink it? I once had a flatmate who was a nurse. She had a patient who came in complaining of stomach pains, which was caused by the cucumber he had shoved up his butt a couple of days earlier. Apparently the smell caused by pickling a cucumber in your colon is extremely nasty. Not the butt, but close to it. My sister worked in a urology clinic and has some very crazy stories ranging from at-home gender surgery procedures to this one case in particular. She had to remove almost 200 BBs from a guy's bladder via his urethra one by one, as the guy had a thing for shoving things down his wee-wee. On my surgery, we had to remove a mini Nerf football from someone's butt. He kept apologizing and saying he wasn't gay. Later, the attending surgeon told us that it's always the straight guys coming in with stuff up their butts, and they always try explaining that they aren't gay. I always love it when they come up with a convoluted story about how the thing got up there. One guy told me with a straight face that he was getting inside his car completely undressed and he forgot there was an avocado on the seat. From looking at the medical videos, I've learned that every type of object known to man has been placed inside of someone's butt somewhere at least once. We progress from sticking everything we see into our mouths as kids to sticking everything into our rear as adults, apparently. Girl I know had suspected cervical cancer. Saw 2 different doctors before a specialist examined her surrounded by trained doctors. He grabbed and pulled on what everyone thought was an inflamed, infected, tumorous cervix. It was a love egg, and it had been in there for 3 months. Don't know what qualifies as weird anymore. Between myself and my friends, there was a glass marital aid, a vibrating marital aid, a travel toothbrush holder, Campbell's soup can, cucumber, mag light, cologne bottle, Sean John, which was unforgivable, time capsule, light bulb, aerosol, and can cap. The oddest one was literally nothing. Guy comes in complaining of something stuck up their butt by the girlfriend. ER doctor feels and there's nothing there. X-ray and CT scan say maybe something in there? I don't feel anything. In the operating room, I feel deeper and still nothing. Finally do a full colonoscopy, and guess what? Nada. Firstly, when he offhandedly mentions that there's a time capsule up there, what? But also, this was not the video I was expecting to get an Uno reverse card in. Pretty sure there's something on my butt. Oh wait, there isn't, is somehow weirder than the usual suspects. Or maybe I've just been exposed to too many of these stories now. I had a friend in med school whose assignment was to figure out how his cadaver had died. He found about $5 in quarters up the man's butt. Don't shove metal up your butt. Metal poisoning is real. Close friend is a radiologist and identified a marital aid on an X-ray with a diameter of 10 centimeters or 4 inches and 22 centimeters long lodged in the guy's butt. The dial at the bottom broke off and couldn't get it out. Ended up on the operating table. I work in medical insurance and we get these internal newsletters from some of our in-house doctors and clinical staff with random medical facts, and had one this week which had a bit about odd things found inside of people, including, but not limited to, a live eel in someone's rectum, which was eating his colon, 40 pocket knives, a Lego tire up a kid's nose from 3 years, a pea plant growing inside a man's lungs, and a candy cane in somebody's rectum. There was a tiny bit of background info with each, but I can't remember all the details. Although the people who write our newsletters are professionals and do educate us about medical conditions and body parts, they do occasionally like to find random stuff to share with us too, like the above. Vet surgeon here might have an unfair advantage in this thread. One time, a dog ate its own foot. The dog came in with a missing paw from the wrist down. The owner had no idea where it went, but the dog also had some serious GI signs. One X-ray elucidated both problems. It's not every day you see an abdomen with a literal limb inside. My ex was a surgeon. A policeman and his wife came in because he had something stuck up his butt. When my ex asked what, the wife said, "A vibrating toy, exactly like this one," and pulled out a 9-inch thing from her handbag. My mum worked in the ER at Johns Hopkins back in the 70s. She pulled a Coke bottle out of a senator's butt. She refuses to say who though because of ethics. I think most people believe that big companies are up the politicians' butts, but this one is taking it a bit too directly. Cassava, and everybody in my country knows it because it showed up in the news because someone in the operating room had the great idea to record a video of it and make it viral. The patient sued the hospital. Middle-aged man goes into the A&E with something up his back package, goes into the X-ray where he sees my girlfriend. And what's up there? 4 baking potatoes. Not the little ones either. Each one's about the size of a fist. As he tells it, he was at home cooking dinner and slipped in the kitchen and 4 potatoes went up his hole. Sure they did. A small sculpture of Jerry Seinfeld made out of fusilli pasta. Internal medicine physician here. Not sure why everyone thinks surgeons would be the ones removing stuff from people's butts when it's probably most often the emergency department or us. Personally, the grossest thing I've manually disimpacted was probably a partially digested whole corn on the cob that the patient had eaten several days prior. Was just pulling out fistfuls of corn for like half an hour. But yes, I've also definitely seen the occasional light bulb, razor blade, or marital aid lost in the abyss. Probably the best story I have here was during residency. My correspondent spent a good amount of time searching around for a Q-tip that a patient lost up his butt while scratching up there. He told the patient he was unsuccessful at finding this thing, only to be asked why in the world he was expecting to find one. Turns out he was supposed to be looking at the patient's roommate's butt. What? Had to go do another rectal exam next door. Must have been an awkward conversation across the curtain later that night. I'm so glad you asked this. My favorite story was a guy who came in with a can of Glade up his butt. What scent, you ask? timeless joy. One time I tooted and it stunk so bad my friends threatened to shove Febreze up my butt. I'm guessing this first guy's friend went through with it. Heard this from my father-in-law who used to work as an ER nurse. They had a guy come in who had gotten slammed drunk. When he was passed out, his friend stuck 2 AA batteries up the guy's Johnson, not up his butt, his front. From what I remember, they had to actually cut the guy open to get them out and stitch it back together. Oh, I agree with you guys. I really hope he tried to charge them. He did tell my father-in-law they'd no longer be his friends. It's an incredible invasion of privacy, if not actual assault. I have no idea how one would pull this off. My friend is literally a butt doctor, and she told me about patients coming in with 10-inch marital aids stuck in their rear, and another one with a vibrating thingamy stuck while it's on. I got to see the x-ray of the 10-incher in there. It was really something. Apparently, he had tried to get it out of his butt for a few hours, struggled really hard, finally gave up and came in to see the doc. That thing still makes me laugh, though. I mean, I put a lot of stuff in my butt. Please don't post about it on Reddit, doctors. This is my dad's story, and not necessarily a weird object, but bear with me. He was working one night, and some poor soul came in with a vibrating toy stuck on up there. To lighten the mood, my dad asked if he wanted it removed or just needed the batteries changed. He may have been asked to go to sensitivity training after that one. You know what? I think I would have appreciated the levity. But then again, I guess I wouldn't care as much about being perceived as gay as some of these middle American surgeries. So if me and my doctor are both on the same page about me ramming things in my rear end, sure, why not make a joke about it? Operating room nurse here. One time I helped remove a G.I. Joe from someone's butt, like a full-size 12-inch OG doll. The x-ray was really funny. My nurse friend had a girl who had a lot of downstairs pain and some bleeding. The doctor took a look and found a horrific smell and discovered a chocolate bar wrapper stuck up there. Turns out her and her boyfriend didn't have a traditional contraceptive and decided the wrapper would do in a pinch. And the jagged edges had cut her on the inside and still had the remnants from several days ago. They found another man's member, and just the member. A French nurse here. I've once seen a 75-year-old man with 3 pétanque balls in his butt. You know, I'm here for all the unqualified posts of people saying, I'm not a surgeon, but I happen to have a butt, several weird objects, and a Dr. Dre album. Does that count? Half a nunchuck. The other half left a nice scar between the eyes of his girlfriend when it broke. She needed stitches. Remember kids, cheap nunchucks you win at a carnival make bad bedroom toys. Wife is a surgeon resident. She's had to remove a toilet brush from a man's butt. When asked why it was up there, he said he wondered how it would feel. Turns out he also wondered about plungers and toothbrushes too. While on my surgery rotation, the weirdest thing I had to remove from a butt was a half-rotten carrot. The patient had put it in thick side first, so it was very slimy and very difficult to get out. We eventually had to take the patient to the operating room, and even then, we opened the OB gin tray to fully get it out. And of course, this happened at like 3 a.m. Yeah, the surgeon was not happy to drive into the work and activate the OR for this. Of course, this sparked a discussion of things people put up their butt, and the winner was the chief PA. He'd seen a guy put a Barbie doll up there, and it was stuck because the arms come out so it was like a barb. It was actually considered a surgical emergency because the hard plastic of the arms had torn apart the rectum, and he was starting to become septic. I can't imagine how the surgeon explained that to his wife. I've been a surgeon for 15 years, and let me tell you, the weirdest thing? Probably Legos. I'm talking Lego people and Lego bricks. So many small pieces. It's hard for me to watch my kids play with them now knowing what I know. Why did you have to GTFO and ghost your previous life? I grew up in a small town with 2 best friends. The 3 of us were extremely tight from elementary school through our early 20s, with a brief interlude when I left for college. But this completely fell apart about 11 years ago. One of my friends was engaged to a real psychopath that liked to toy with her, and that relationship made her mean-spirited, insecure, and paranoid as all hell. He came over one Sunday to fix my old snowblower, which I was planning to sell since I recently moved to an apartment. I offered him a beer, and he took that as an opening and tried to kiss me and put his hands on me. I turned him down pretty harshly, but I decided not to tell my friend, who was pregnant at the time and easily upset. Well, he was pretty mad about that, turned around and told her that I tried to seduce him. Long story short, she believed him. She went into an emotional tailspin, destroyed some stuff, and burned a lot of bridges. My other friend decided no smoke without fire and believed him as well. Word got around my small hometown pretty quickly, and it felt like everyone turned on me in a heartbeat. After all, my two best lifelong friends believed I'd try to seduce one's fiancée and caused her to destroy her life, and it was deemed weird that I'd invited him over to fix my snowblower in the summer, even though it was because I'd moved into an apartment. Even the people who were kinda on the fence about who to believe stayed the hell away from me. It didn't matter that he'd always been a butthole and a player, and their relationship and her emotional state had been on the rocks for ages. And I was ashamed too. I wondered if I'd led him on in some way. I was devastated for my friend, and I couldn't hold my head up. I started avoiding people. For 2 years, I was either angry or depressed all the time. I stopped going out, I lost about 30 pounds, and I was only 130 to start with. I cried all the time. It never occurred to me to seek therapy. I also never seriously considered standing up for myself, confronting him publicly, laying it all out in the open in one big blow-up. I finally got out because a college friend of mine happened to be road tripping across country, paid me a visit, and was shocked at how much I changed. He convinced me to go with him, and I did. Turns out the only good thing about having depression and never going out to socialize for almost 2 years except for work was that I had a healthy savings account. It's amazing how little you spend when you stop trying to keep up appearances for others. I told my landlord I was leaving the next day, paid another 2 months, and left the deposit in exchange for him getting rid of my stuff and having the apartment cleaned. I packed my bags and just left with my friend. That road trip helped remind me there was a much bigger and brighter world out there than my crappy little town and all the drama left behind. At the end of it, I crashed at his home for 3 months before I got back on my feet, got my own place, and got a steady job. I was really lucky with the latter. It was the height of the recession, and the job market was rough. He and I stayed friends for 2 more years before we started dating. We've been married now for 6. 4 or 5 years into my new life, I reached out to my other friend, not the one whose partner wrecked everything. I did this in part for closure, and part, if we're honest, due to morbid curiosity. But she didn't want to talk. More than a decade of friendship, and she still didn't want to just hear me out. It was really at that moment that I was able to truly leave things behind. It seems surreal, but I rarely think of that part of my life anymore. My memories of that time aren't all that sharp. Those 2 years were a blur. Sometimes I wonder what happened to them, if my former friend came out of it all okay and got away from that guy, but it doesn't keep me up at night. I look at my life now, and I'm a happy person, stable, content in my life, and secure. I can honestly say now that the whole thing hasn't left any lasting trauma on me, except that I doubt I'll ever let myself have friendships that went that deep and hurt that much. I have a lot of friends, a few that are closer than others, but none super close. Except my husband, of course, and I don't really miss it all that much. 2 years of that. I guess it's hard to move on when you're hoping that what had been your entire social life might come back, but I think I would have already moved elsewhere if things were really that bad for that long. But it sounds like when you did get out, it was eventually a completely worthwhile move, so congratulations on that. I bailed because I wanted to escape family drama. And I did. Life is still full and rich with incident, but I no longer have to hear family members boast, lie, rage, and try to pull me into it all. Peace. I was cheated on when I lived on the East Coast, so this year I packed up my crap and drove 1,600 miles to a city I've really liked for years, and I'm starting over now. It's been 3 weeks and I've not regretted it. Even though I don't know anyone here, I'm meeting new people all the time that are nicer than most anyone I knew before. I worked at a medical green herb dispensary in the LA area for 6 years. One day it got raided, so that life abruptly came to an end. I had to figure out what my next move was, so I packed all of my stuff into a storage locker and got on a Greyhound bus to Arizona. My mum moved to Phoenix a couple of years prior, so I had a place to stay, just no clue what I was going to do. Now I work doing inventory management and web design for a small business. I also got back into school, so I'm 1 semester away from transferring to ASU. I'm 27, but I finally made it to university. After all that time smoking green herb and being the cool guy, it's very humbling to be in a town where you don't know anyone. I got tired of working 65 hours a week at night. Even though I was making $75K a year, it was salary and came out after taxes as $16.20 an hour. I bought a van, got it geared out, and I'm starting a job as a whitewater rafting guide in May. I don't know how it'll work out yet, but it sounds like fun. I had an extremely high-paying job in the UK, but was working ridiculous hours when I was in the UK, and would frequently get late-night calls that I needed to be in some random country the next day for an unspecified amount of time. I had a lot of cash built up, but no social life or friends because I just couldn't maintain them with the way I was working. As a child, my parents had decided to foster 2 brothers so that I wouldn't grow up as an only child. However, the kids they ended up fostering were clinical psychopaths, formally diagnosed, and ended up in long-term secure care. One of them escaped whilst on a day trip and went to the police claiming to be me and spinning a tale about how my father had been mistreating me. Without checking the story, the police arrested my dad and one of them decided to tell the neighbors what was going on. By the time I found out and got it sorted, the story had spread around the neighborhood and kept growing with the retelling. Eventually, my dad moved back to Barbados, which has a US-style healthcare system. Before his private healthcare could kick in, he came down sick and blew through all his savings on medical care. I stepped in and also started blowing through my savings, paying for his treatment and upgrading his home to be able to support him in a wheelchair. He eventually died from complications of the treatments, and I flew out to Barbados for the last time for his funeral. He had left very strict instructions for his funeral, no fancy coffin, cremation, and remains to return to the UK to be interred alongside my mother. However, his family thought differently and kept hounding his partner trying to get a ridiculously gaudy funeral. We eventually compromised and had his ashes interred in the family plot, but even then at the ceremony I had members of the family coming up to me and telling me that other family members, or even his partner, were trying to steal all of his money. When I got back to the UK, the whole thing was finally too much for me, so I quit my job and eventually moved to Australia, where I work in a much lower paying job but don't have any of the stress or workload, and I can step out of my office, get on a tram and go down to the beach at any time. Only one person connected to my family knows where I am, and even they don't know enough to find me without hiring a PA. And knowing that I'm 36 hours of travel time away from the lot of them is quite reassuring. Just moved halfway across the country after leaving a toxic relationship with a woman I'm convinced would keep trying to F with my life. I've got some savings and a place to stay, but the uncertainty is real, man. I feel happier than I've ever been. The world is at my fingertips right now. Time will tell if I'm a success story. I left because I was the black sheep. I'm the middle child of 5, and to my parents, the other 4 siblings were more successful, perfect, smart, and just plain better than me. When I met my successful spouse, they called me a gold digger, but at the same time they were glad I was apparently his problem now. I don't even know what I did, really. I just drew the short straw on kids whose parents can deal with them, I guess. I think my parents only had kids for show, so when the teen hormones made me a bit more of a handful than my siblings, they couldn't deal with me and wrote me off. Spouse had his own issues with his family. So, 20 years ago, we moved to another country. Barely even said goodbye. We're wildly successful now with teen kids of our own, even hormonal difficult ones, and guess what, Pops? We still love them to death. My family back home have been through divorces and misery since then, but not us. We're doing well. We're still in love. Life is great. Truly, the best revenge is living well. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Born and raised in my hometown in Central Florida, about 19 years old, and became addicted to smack and other things. About 6 years of that life and doing whatever I could to not slip into withdrawals, I decided to move as far away as I could from any of my dealers and all of my friends, with my mother's help, God bless her soul. First couple of months were terrible dealing with withdrawals and the depression that comes with it. But once I finally got past that slope, I was able to finally hold down a job and become an average person. It's been about 2 years since I left home, and now I'm rebuilding my credit. 650, baby. I got myself a girlfriend who's pretty neat, I got myself a pup that I love more than anything in the world, and overall just became a straight-up normal person, and I'm extremely happy where I am in life now. I never thought I'd be on this side of addiction, and just being able to type this is crazy to me. Honestly, it's so impressive that you were able to get over your addiction that way. Although it's a decision that should be taken with a degree of research, folks. Withdrawals can kill. Use helplines and, like this person, relatives or dear ones who want the best for you and are prepared to put up with your crap while it happens. Came here to say that if your parents treat you like dirt, don't wait around for them to change, because they won't. Don't waste a minute of your life hoping they can fix what they broke in you. I left home when I was 16, but I maintained contact with my mother, always thinking that she'd change. If I could do it over again, I'd walk out and never contact her again. I'm much happier not being in contact with her. I wish I'd done it sooner. Same. The best decision I ever made was to finally move out of my hometown when I was 24. One of my more regrettable decisions was to wait until then. Oh, and I'm also very happy to have cut out my parents. Haven't spoken to my dad in 3 years. I blocked my enabling mum on Facebook last month. Muting that voice that tells you you're total dog crap is such a relief. I left town because I was being hounded night and day by an ex-boss. She didn't like that I had to go on medical leave to address an issue, so she called everyone in our field and told them she'd found me in bed with her husband. I ended up switching fields and going back to school. I pursued a legal action against her, and once I graduated school and started looking for a job, I found she'd still blacklisted me at several agencies. I booked a U-Haul, packed up everything I owned, and drove my cat and I halfway across the country. I'm pretty successful out here. I have a great paying job, 2 wonderful children, my own house, and minimal relationships with other people. When I was 22 years old, I ghosted my PhD program. I went straight from undergrad to PhD in computer science at Georgia Tech. I had great grades and test scores, but I really had no idea what I wanted to do. Before my, departure, I had a 4.0 GPA and a research assistantship, and I was absolutely miserable. Overworked, struggling to make ends meet, clueless on what I wanted to do, no free time whatsoever, just miserable. Then one day in database theory class, I read a letter from my friend about how if I was really unhappy, just to stop. Just get up wherever I was and leave. Just do it. So I did. I got up in the middle of database theory class, walked to the door of the classroom, I dropped the textbook, written by the professor who I thought was a pretty big jerk, into the trash can with a resounding thud, and just left. Cleared out my cubicle, drove to my apartment, got a crappy second shift job so I could go job hunting in the mornings, told nobody, sent no emails, called no one, returned no calls, and explained nothing. I've not been back to that campus in 25 years. I was in bad shape at the time, with depression and general anxiety and severe anemia, all without knowing it. But I did make it through. It took about a month to find a great job that I've been at for the past 25 years. Though it took many years and a trip to the ER, I eventually got my depression, general anxiety, and anemia all addressed. It's still a balancing act. I still need help sometimes, but it's generally good. Work paid for me to get my master's degree. I like my job pretty well, and I like my co-workers and immediate management. All in all, though it seemed like my life was falling apart at the time, it was honestly one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. I live in a very toxic household full of thieves and manipulators, planning to get away soon. Finished my service in the Peace Corps, went home for a few days to the East Coast, then got in my car with my dog, who I rescued and raised during my Peace Corps service and brought home with me, also the few belongings I had, and then we just drove across country to the Midwest, to a town where I knew nobody. I stayed at a random Super 8 motel because I was broke and no other places would allow dogs while I looked for my own place. Felt totally overwhelmed adjusting back to American culture. It was bliss to have a shower all to myself and a bed. But I was also pretty lonely except for the fact that I had a dog. Eventually, found a room in some divorcee's basement, did that for a while and worked some waitressing jobs. Upgraded to a house with 3 random Craigslist roommates, only one of whom had to be evicted for being a creep. Worked as a nanny, a TEFL teacher, and then as a life skills teacher for Planned Parenthood. Still struggling adjusting back to life in America, struggling with serious depression, but mostly working my butt off at the multiple jobs to make ends meet. Then I applied and was accepted to law school. Did that, met my fiancée there, graduated, and I'm now a trial attorney. Bumpy but interesting road. I wouldn't change a thing. Born and raised in a crappy little California city. I hated it. It was crowded, noisy, polluted, and full of crime. Not to mention there was a huge unemployment rate. Hopped from job to job after school, dated girl after girl, hung out with friend after friend. None of it really had any lasting effect. It's like nothing was clicking, no matter what I did. Heck, I thought I'd be one of those empty shells that lived through life just going through the paces, but never actually living, you know? After a while, everything was just annoying me. Girlfriends were annoying me, friends were annoying me, even family was getting on my nerves. I go on a clear-my-head vacation to a family member in Oregon, and goddamn, it actually worked. I came home to my crap apartment, took one look at my roommate and declared, I'm done with this crap, all of it. I give my roommate 30 days notice, quit my job, tell my girlfriend to hit the road, tell all my friends to get bent, and move away in just over a month. I moved to Oregon with only a tiny snapshot, but it's like it was meant to be. Been with my wife for over 12 years, working a great job, own a great home, happier than I've ever been. I just needed to get away from the bad juju to make it happen. Sometimes wiping the slate clean and taking a chance on nothing but a hunch is what the soul needs. Best of luck to you out there who've done the same. I didn't exactly ghost, but I did abandon the pursuit of a PhD program because the allure of having a doctor prefix against my name just wasn't worth the drudgery I was undergoing. I instead moved continents and took up a new job in an allied field, and I'm more at peace, far away from what I found was a pointless academic experience. I do fervently hope that something changes in this so I can resume in a few years and get my doctorate. Yeah, I know a lot of people who start their PhDs and then realize that this is something that's going to be a thankless lot of work unless they get one of the really lucky professor positions, or are the sort who really burn with passion for teaching. I think the people who can thrive doing that are amazing, but they are very few and far between, and I don't begrudge anyone else who quits on it. I was born and raised in the same town. I lived there for 20 years. I had 2 friends that were my best friends from the time I was 12, and one was my roommate. Things started to get weird between us. They obviously didn't care about me, and I started to realize it. A few months ago, I got into a car wreck and got amnesia from it, if you'd call it that. I lost 2 days before that and about 7 hours after the wreck. I went home and I got in a fight with him over nothing. I honestly can't remember it, but I accused him of stealing things that were already in my room. I was completely out of it and aggressive for no reason. Neither of them believed me or cared that I got in a wreck. They claimed I was just drunk or on something and that I didn't actually have a concussion. Even though I've never acted aggressive while under the influence of anything, I realized that they didn't care about me anymore, so I told my roommate I was moving out in 30 days and left. I moved 4 states away and started a new life. I haven't talked to them since. I abandoned doing mortgage and title-related work after being laid off from Quicken Loans, and started working a quick takeout sushi joint. I'm now a practicing sushi chef working at a 4-star restaurant, and I couldn't be happier. I wasn't exactly an adult at the time, but I dropped out of school at 15 and haven't seen or spoken to anybody I used to know since. I was always a good student, by no means a teacher's pet, but I never got into any trouble. And I always found schoolwork itself pretty easy without needing much effort. Then all the GCSE coursework started, and I found myself struggling with it. I understood the material, no problem, I just wasn't very good at expressing it in an essay or writing up an experiment. I got caught in a vicious cycle where I was struggling, so I'd put off doing it, and then because of deadlines, struggle even more, so I'd put it off more. In the end, I guess I couldn't handle not being the A student I'd always been, so I refused to leave the house, and for a while I wouldn't talk to anybody. 13 years later, and I still live with my parents, no job, no qualifications, so no real hope of a job, no friends, and no life. Fortunately, no depression or anything, but there's just no real desire to do anything, and I just spend my days sat at home looking for something to keep me occupied. Stay in school, kids. Packed up one day and moved from Georgia to Michigan, for multiple reasons, but the key reason was to be with a long-time friend who I'd met on the internet. We tried to make it work for a couple of years, but ultimately we had to break up over Thanksgiving last year. The other reasons were to get the absolute F out of that middle-of-nowhere hellhole I'd been raised in, out in the country. I grew up in the woods by myself, an hour away from everything. It stunted my emotional and social growth to the point that I basically grew up in solitary confinement. I literally lived out on the actual river that they filmed Deliverance on. It was also a food desert, and the few restaurants the next town over were utter crap. Now I live in a little tourist trap on the shores of Lake Michigan. I don't own a car, and I can get anywhere I want on bicycle. I spend most days hanging out with folks at the coffee shop downtown, which has really good food. I finally have a circle of friends and I meet new people all the time. The restaurants are all fantastic. The only bad thing is the snow and ice. The winters here suck crap through a screen door. But personally speaking, I think it was a good trade because Georgia summers are basically a sauna full of spiders as big as your frickin' hands. I miss my mum and my brother and sister though. I wish I could fly down to visit them. I left my home because it had reached such a stagnant state. No water and no electric. Crap went downhill after my mum's boyfriend had a stroke. I took up working to support everyone, but eventually my sister's boyfriend cost me my job. Eventually, my mum and I had to live with him and my sister after my mum's boyfriend left as well. It was hell. I knew I had to make a choice. I left home to possibly make something of myself to better take care of my mum. Flash forward to now. I'm still unemployed and homeless, but I'm trying. I have several skills but no credentials. I know investment methods to get me out of the rut, but I need an initial opportunity to get there. There's one thing I won't do, and that's give the F up. Either life is going to break me, or I'll break life. I moved out and away from my parents, my co-workers, my very few friends, and my state. I dropped everything, took my cat, traveled 9 hours to my now fiancé's. No letter, no note, changed my phone number, changed my legal name. It's great. No more horrible treatment from my dad, no more broken family being a constant emotional issue and reminder every day. No more constant contact from my awful ex on a daily basis. No more people who've known me for years. No more of what I'm used to. It's great. I'm slowly getting on my feet. I've got an okay job. It pays the bills. Saving up for a car on the other hand. Aiming for my GED this year and then college. Ex-teachers or professors, what made you ditch your career? A female student I had disciplinary issues with accused me of hitting on her and making obscene gestures towards her. I'm an openly gay man and most of the staff knew this, yet the district still put me on suspension while they investigated. They were able to prove she was lying, but the district decided that the best course of action was to transfer me to another school instead of, punishing the student. I quit at the end of the school year and got a job in banking. A student had a mental breakdown in the library, smashed a wooden chair, and gouged a pencil in his arm while screaming that he wanted us to all go away, and I got reamed out for not calling campus security before I called 911. And yes, depending on your school, there might be many good points about why on-site security should be called first. Honestly, everyone should check with their institution and find out the protocols, but let your ethical and moral code guide you too. Please skip ahead if you have issues with violent events. Frankly, I'm glad I called 911 first, or this story would have had a really bad ending. When the student gouged his arm, he must have hit something because blood started pulsing out of his arm. He inflated. I don't know how else to explain it. He turned purple and screamed even louder. He took a step towards another student, looked at his arm again, fainted, smashed his face into the corner of the table and just started convulsing. The 911 dispatcher talked us through what we needed to do until the EMTs got there. The student did survive. Nobody else was physically hurt. He sent a thank you card after he got out of the treatment program. On calling security first, I was never informed of that policy. None of the other staff or faculty who were trying to get the other students out or hidden in a staff room knew about the policy either. Others called 911 as well. The person who screamed at me for not following the chain of command was the person who was supposed to train all faculty and staff in the policy. They didn't do that. The school did have a history of not reporting vandalism, car break-ins, and thefts to local law enforcement. I don't think that came into play with this event. I still second-guess myself about those events, but sometimes you can only do the best with what's in front of you. I had a student that copied off another kid during a test. I gave him a 0%. The parents came in to complain to administration that since I hadn't explicitly said during the first day of orientation that cheating wasn't allowed, it was an unfair punishment. Administration forced me to allow him an opportunity to retake the test. He never retook it, and the grade of 0 still stood. Still, I was so disillusioned by the entire experience that I started looking the next day at college programs that I could use to transition away from public education. Yeah, the more I hear about the administration of schools, the more I don't like it. Talk about a group of people hogging a disproportionate amount of resources for their own salaries, while they cut literally everything else the school actually needs to function down to the bone. I'm sure not all administrators are bad and do care about the educational experience of their kids, but there is definitely a misallocation of funds and focus going on at that level. 2 weeks into my first year teaching 9th grade math, I had a girl attack another girl for no reason in my class. She was grabbing onto her hair really tightly and I was trying to break it up. Another student tried to help me out, and somehow the instigating student managed to punch him in the face and give him a bloody nose, while still holding on to the other student's hair. Now, what makes this story relevant is I literally said the uncensored words, "F this," while trying to break up a fight. Not loud, not to a student, but just like, "F this, I'm not going to let this happen in my class right now." Well, the instigating student decided to tell the principal that I was cursing at her. Despite the other students in my class supporting me and the fact that this student had a history of violence, I got a letter in my permanent file saying that I'd used inappropriate language towards a student. Let me just say, F that. Teaching taught me a lot, but I couldn't do it for more than a couple of years. Really respect those that persevere and make it their career. When the principal told me one of my students' mother was getting her secondary education certification so she could move up to teach high school math where her son was, so they wouldn't be renewing my contract to teach the following year. But they were in need of a network administrator for the school district, and they were willing to pay me a teacher's $25,000 salary to do it, and I'd be answering to each building principal like a janitor, not to the superintendent like a district-level admin. The principal's niece made a B in my freshman geography class, and the teacher wanted me to bump it up to an A. Because the child couldn't get into Texas A&M with a B in freshman class on her record. This school also pressured teachers to fail no students. End of year, assessing students to see who had progressed through to the second year. While assessing the work, the department head came in and said we had to fail X amount due to facilities and resources for the next year. He then returned an hour later and said that due to the budget, we actually needed to pass a higher number than originally thought. I completely ignored what he'd said and carried on marking on merit, but it was the proverbial straw. This was a UK university a few years ago. The system has been really messed up in recent years, let me tell you. When admin wouldn't let me take more than 4 days off after a close friend died unexpectedly. "You're letting the kids down" is a phrase I heard over and over again as I tried to reason with them. Parents yelling at me for accusing their little prince of acting out and getting zero support from administration. I think John Mulaney had a great joke about that. "One thing that's changed since I was growing up is parents believing their children over adults and teachers. My parents would literally believe any adult over me. A homeless man could drag me to my house and tell my mom, 'Your son just bit me on the crotch.' And my mom would say, 'Jonathan, why did you bite this nice man's crotch?' Meanwhile, I'd be standing there like, doesn't anyone want to know why I bit his crotch? Doesn't anyone care about why his crotch was so close to my chompers?" I failed a college student who never came to class and missed both the midterm and final exams. The influential parents complained to the school. The administration later went into the digital records and changed the fail to a passing grade without my knowledge. I found out later, third hand. Ergo, I refused to sign a second-year contract that they offered me. I caught a student cheating, but stupid cheating. He cheated off someone else with the wrong answers and the same wrong spelling. When I spoke to him regarding taking a new test, which was generous on my part considering it should have been a 0 per school policy, he refused and said I'd be hearing from his parents. I, of course, did hear from them via my principal within an hour. Gotta love kids and their phones readily available. Fast forward to meeting with the student, parents, and principal, I had his test and the one from which he cheated. Upon showing this to the parents, I fully expected them to understand and hold their son accountable. No. Instead, the parents demanded an apology from me for branding their son a cheater, which would negatively impact him for the rest of his life. And also, it's the least I could do since they were, quote, paying my salary. When I said I wouldn't apologize for catching their son cheating, the father said I was lucky I was a woman because otherwise he'd punch me in the face. Nice. So yeah, good times. Glad I got my master's for that. Admin ended the meeting at that moment. It shouldn't have gotten that far. I can't remember, this was over 10 years ago, the student was taken out of my class. So everybody wins. New admin these days, they're actually super supportive of everyone. They hold teachers, parents, students, custodians, cafeteria workers, and everyone in between responsible. Parents still get a little crazy, but as a staff we feel very much supported. Also, for the record, I do love my job. It comes with its insane stories like they all do, right? When the prestigious high school I was working at focused on sports more than academics. On top of that, it turned out that the principal overrode teachers' marks if they tried giving students a failing grade. F that. My mum retired as a special education teacher after a student bit her hard enough to draw blood. She had to get a ton of tests for everything from hepatitis to frickin' rabies. She was fine, thankfully, but that was when she decided she had had enough. She went on to sub for non-special ed kids and eventually to do administrative work at a charity for ASD individuals. A kid poured gasoline under the door of my room after hours, and they lit it, burning most of the room. The facility guys worked all weekend to clean it up and paint it, hauling in new desks to replace those burned. Not long after that, I found out I could make more money with less hassle by waiting tables at the beach. Plus, the beach has women in bikinis. I was gone a week later. I was about to call this person a bit of a lechy creep, but I guess the primary motivation was indeed the money and the lack of death by fire. Plus, he or she didn't specifically say that they were just standing there ogling women, only that those women happened to be there and were a positive aspect. Who doesn't like hot people in beachwear, I suppose? You get a tentative pass, drooling beach waiter. I was teaching middle school English while overseas in Europe when two students, a boy and a girl, began viciously fighting after the boy made comments about the girl's mother. For most people, this would be easy to break up, but as a 5'5" manlet, both the 13-year-old kids had several inches and pounds on me. When I positioned myself in between them, they took a break from fighting each other to work as a team to push me over a desk. They then promptly resumed punching each other's lights out. I quit that week. In case anyone's interested, the fight ended abruptly when the girl gave the boy a nosebleed and he finally let go of her ponytail. I was substituting at a low-income middle school for the day, about 40 students per class. Just had a simple worksheet for them to work on every hour rotation. Spent the day breaking up fistfights, with chairs or desks being thrown across the room, students having screaming matches, students climbing and dancing on their desks, students just leaving class during the chaos. I had 6 students turn in the completed worksheet for an entire day of class rotations. I realized I was no longer a teacher, but a prison guard with fewer benefits and no way to defend myself. I guarantee 80% of those kids will end up dead or in prison before the age of 25. Never again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was a high school teacher with 7 years experience in my district and a master's degree. I was making $49K. This was in 2013. I was talking to a friend who was in from out of town. This friend had barely made it through his bachelor's degree, even with a lot of help from me and other friends. Over dinner, he was complaining about not getting a good enough raise, so he was only making $143K at his software consulting job. He didn't do the technical stuff, more customer relations. So I left teaching to make more money. I am now, but it's taken me a while and I really miss working with the kids. I wish I'd stayed in teaching, to be honest. I was invited to apply for another job. There's this feeling among professors that though our jobs feel insufferably exhausting and stressful sometimes, that it's just the best possible job anyone could have and we should be nothing but thankful that we have them. I guess that's what keeps us going through all the bullcrap. Recently, someone invited me to apply for a directorship at another institution, meaning I'd move up several ranks and direct a research program and facility. When I was being told about the job, I was like, so let me get this straight. I never have to teach again. All of my research will be done with and by a large team of enthusiastic, well-paid, trained professionals rather than itinerant, underpaid grad students and postdocs that I have to recruit and train every year. I never have to write another grant, and you'll pay me twice as much as I make now? This completely broke the spell. I realized that being a professor, on balance, is actually a horrible job in a lot of ways. I think it's just so hard to get a job in academia that we brainwash ourselves that it's the best thing ever to go through this whole long, humiliating process. We know about these other jobs, but the buzz is that you're paid well and highly respected, but in turn you sell your intellectual soul, so you should never want them. But it's just not true. There are some great jobs out there where you can still be a scholar, an even more productive and effective one in many cases, and not have to deal with the other crap. A lot of people will be hearing this and think I hate teaching, which I guess is understandable. But I don't. I love it, and I think most professors do. What I don't love is having to work to run a research program. Recruitment, mentoring, grant writing, fund management, personnel management, manuscript preparation, manuscript reviews, and of course, actual research. I get to do this along with the work of designing and teaching courses. Teaching is not just time-consuming, it can be very taxing on your mental energies as well. What I didn't like about it was having to do 2 full-time jobs at the same time. So if I can only do one, that's super. I'm getting a lot of requests for career advice concerning going into academia, and here's one of my responses below, that I think applies to what many people may want to know. If you want to go into academia, I say go for it. Don't drink the Kool-Aid about how being a professor is the chosen glory path, or the other Kool-Aid about how it's all a miserable rat race. A lot of how your academic career goes is how you will define it. If you love teaching, you can find yourself at an institution that emphasizes that. Conversely, if you prefer research, go to one that leans that way. If you hate writing grants, you'll find less expensive research to do. There are many ways to have an academic career. Go in with your eyes open and ready to form your career as you need it to go. The only rule, I think, is that you do have to work very hard to succeed. But the good news is that hard work pays off much more regularly than in other instances, I find anyway. And by hard work, I don't mean just effort, I mean results. But if you get the results, even if they aren't something huge and earth-shattering, doors will open for you. At some point, you may decide that you don't love what you do enough to justify all that hard work. This is understandable, and then you can look for a new path. During my student teaching, I was at a parent-teacher conference. I was speaking to a parent whose son was failing, mostly because he did none of his homework. She was angry with me and pretty much told me it was my fault. She asked me why I wasn't making sure he did his homework. I said, it's homework, meaning work you do at home. It's your responsibility to help him and make sure he does it. She complained about me to the teacher I was student teaching for. He warned me that teaching is very political and that teachers can keep you from getting tenure or get you fired. Other teachers told me that this was the climate nowadays. Children are not held accountable and parents blame you for their lack of parenting skills. I decided that it wasn't worth it to finish the teaching program, so I finished early with a degree in history and poli-sci, the subjects I would have taught, history and social studies in the schools. My degree is pretty much useless, but I still make more than a teacher does. I think the conversation about where the burden of responsibility for kids' behavior and work ethic goes is quite a lively and complicated one. But I do think that I generally agree with the Northern European model, where quite often you see parents are at least partially held accountable for their kids' homework and behavior. Of course, there's nuance, but I think it's preferable to hardworking educators being punished for things outside of their control. I work and teach in higher education. I still teach online and had a student a few semesters ago who did hardly any work but asked for an exemption from all the work she didn't do. I had to reply and confirm she was asking to just get a passing grade for doing no work because I thought I was just reading it wrong. There's an amazing amount of student entitlement that I didn't see 10 years ago, sort of like, I pay for a passing grade in this course, instead of, I pay for access to college-level content. I think all the really great free resources online have changed the way they look at learning, and we haven't kept up. A bit off topic, but I've recently been spending time at my kid's elementary school setting him up with an IEP. Just working with the staff and watching how fast-paced it is really surprised me. I'd be in a meeting and suddenly a walkie-talkie would go off and they'd have to go out and handle a student issue and then come back to me, and that switching gears process is non-stop. And this might just be because I live in a relatively small town, but it seems like every teacher and staff member knows every kid's name and really seems to care. After spending years working with doctors trying to help my kid, it's the people at his school who dramatically changed his and our life in just a few months. I know I couldn't do the work they do, and will be forever indebted to them for their intervention. I was a substitute teacher working on becoming a real teacher. I was a regular sub of this class of second grade kids, maybe first. I'm not really sure how to put what I have to say into words, but basically, I couldn't watch good kids get ruined by their parents. There were 4 or 5 kids I can think of, but I only remember 2 of their names, Isaac and Felix. Both of them were constantly in trouble. Felix because he didn't pay attention and drifted from one thing to the next, almost certainly an intellectual or learning disability at play, and Isaac because he was constantly acting out for attention. Now, did I have to get on these kids 50 times over the same crap? Yes. Did they kind of drive me crazy? Hell yes. But they were good kids. Felix was the sweetest little boy. He distracted all of the kids around him, but he distracted them by being nice to them. He'd just start chatting with them and seeing how they were and stuff. It was actually really endearing, but not helpful when little Billy is supposed to be doing his math and not talking. Isaac was less pleasant, but he was a smart kid. He did really stupid stuff because it made the other kids laugh. He was a decent guy, and if I stopped him, took him aside and said, "Look, you know you can't act like this. What's your deal?" He'd be like, "I don't know. Listen, I know you can be good and behave well. I've seen you do it. How about you behave yourself for me today so I can tell your teacher how good you've been?" And he'd brighten up and look happy, and for a few hours he'd be as well behaved as I could ask for. Eventually he'd do some new stupid thing and I'd give him a look and he'd kind of grin bashfully and stop. But every time I saw these kids I had to start from scratch again. Their mothers were substance addicts, and I don't know if they had fathers in the picture at all. Frickin' Felix. We were supposed to wait with the kids until their parents came and got them. On multiple occasions, Felix's mother was hours late. Hours. These kids get out at 2 p.m. and I'm there until 5 p.m. waiting for this lady, who rolls up, in pajamas with her hair crazy and no makeup on. What have you been doing all day besides not taking care of your kid? Isaac at least, his mum came and got him on time, but as soon as she was with him, she'd nitpick and peck at him about everything. "Why are you smiling like that?" "No reason." "Well, stop making stupid faces." "What the frick, lady? No wonder your kid acts like a terror in class." Over the course of the year, I watched both of them get worse and worse. I really couldn't do anything about it. I talked about them with the teacher. She felt the same way. She had made some formal complaints about the parents, but nothing came of it. After that, I just couldn't do it. I work in higher education now in a non-teaching position. I still watch people fail without being able to help sometimes, but I can help them more directly now than I could have before. I couldn't watch that happen year after year with a new batch of kids each time. F that, it makes my heart ache. I caught a kid selling substances in the hallway and I turned him in. He threatened to kill me with an ice pick. He was super unstable and volatile and had a criminal record, so I didn't doubt that he might try it. The principal refused to remove him from my class because he has the right to have an education. My other students took it upon themselves to escort me through the school in between classes and walk me to my car after school in a big huddle so that Ice Pick Boy couldn't get to me. F that. A lot of people asked why I didn't contact the police. I actually did. We had a PD stationed in the school. But nothing happened because the kid's mum was a cop as well and she pulled strings to have the whole thing quashed. I didn't file a union grievance because it was almost the end of the school year, and that crap takes time. I just decided to quit and move far, far away instead. Also, to everyone telling me I shouldn't have ratted on the kid and snitches get stitches, I get it, you're edgy. But it was literally my job to help these kids become functioning adults, and selling illegal stuff in front of your teacher is definitely an indication that you're heading down the wrong path. I actually could have lost my job if I didn't report him, so no regrets. For me, it was the time I was breaking up a fight between a 12-year-old boy and girl, and the boy turned around and punched me in the groin as hard as he could. The school administrators did nothing, his mum was in the room with him, she did nothing. The general feeling was, this kid's mum pays tuition, so deal with it. I dealt with it by leaving the school, opening my own private school, and taking half the students with me. Early in my career, I had students who were plagiarizing lab reports. I turned them in, mostly because I felt I had to. The school made a huge frickin' deal about cheating and had an academic honesty pledge statement students wrote on every test. One set of parents screamed at me over the phone. Next thing I knew, I had a meeting with the vice principal who said they didn't want the cheating to interfere with the students' future, and he ripped up all the plagiarism reports I wrote that year. My second time saying F this was based on the cumulative effects of being unsupported by the school. They changed which courses I was teaching and the grade level. We had a construction project going on, so there was constant noise, including beeping and drilling, even when they promised it wouldn't be during the school day. That was a lie. Stupid school-wide initiatives. More pointless meetings, incompetent higher-ups. It's the adults in the system that make it hard to be a teacher. The kids are generally not the problem. Who proved to you that people become brain dead when they become customers? I fly private jets. Once we were flying east early in the morning, so the sun was directly in our eyes. A passenger was sitting directly behind us on the jump seat. He leaned forward and asked us, "Is there any way we can just climb and get above the sun?" No, there isn't. I mean, we could fly west to our destination, but that would probably take a little bit longer. Can you Photoshop some pictures for me? Sir, this is a bookstore. Yes, but I see you have a computer right there. Once, while working at an eye doctor's office, a woman was upset because we were charging her to make new lenses with an updated prescription, and asked, "Why do you have to make new lenses? Just inject some more medicine into the ones I already got." What a wondrous world that woman lives in. I worked at REI a few years back, large outdoor sporting goods co-op, just in case you haven't heard of it. And we sold bear spray, which is like pepper spray for bears. A woman came in with her 2 kids one day and bought a canister because they were going camping. She gets to the front door and then comes back to the register as an afterthought and asks if she's just supposed to spray the kids from head to toe with it. I mean, thank God she came back. Having been exposed to pepper spray once for training, I have to agree. Those kids would have never forgiven her. I was working at a car battery store when a customer came in with a receipt for a battery he had bought a couple of weeks ago, asking for a refund. I asked him if he had the battery with him so that we could take the battery back and refund him the money, when he said, "No, I don't have it anymore. I put it in the car I just sold." Confused, I replied with, "You want us to refund you for a battery that you don't have anymore?" And he responds, just as confused, "Yeah, well, I don't have the battery anymore, so why should I have to pay for it? You need to refund me." He did not leave the store happy that day. To the naysayers, from how he explained after that, it seemed like the idea in his head was that the guy who owned the battery now should have to pay for it because it had our 5-year service warranty, but that somehow we had to figure it out with that guy how to get our money back. What? You never think that, "I'm sorry, sir, in order to return a product, you have to return the product," would be a thing you'd have to explain to a grown person. But I guess we're going to see a few conversational and logical breakthroughs in this video, aren't we? Let's rip into some more. I very briefly worked at a Wendy's some years back. I was working the drive-thru. A woman ordered 2 meals, one with a small drink and one with a large. As I handed her the 2 different-sized drinks, she asked, "Which one's the large?" When I worked at Wendy's, we had a guy come through the drive-thru backwards. Another car went through the right way, and the first guy had to back out around the building. But instead of doing that, he got out of his car and started yelling at me, "I'm not from around here," for like 5 minutes. Oh boy, I have stories. I worked for a major wireless cell carrier in the US. "Duh, can I pay my phone bill here? It's not this company, but you guys are all the same, right?" "No? I don't understand why you won't provide me a service I'm paying for." Which, we're not even the ones providing you the service. Also was, how do I make a phone call?" "Just press the application labeled phone." "Where?" "On the phone." "Right here? The one that looks like a phone?" Yes, nothing's happening. Well, normally when you want to make a phone call and you don't have any contacts programmed into the phone, dialing a phone number is required. If I wanted to waste time dialing numbers, I would have stuck with my landline. And then there's the other regular questions. What's the difference between a call and a text? How do I turn my phone on? What's my Facebook password? Do you have any cases that will stop the phone from giving me the cancer? If I stop paying my bill, will they shut the phone off? Will my pictures, pronounced yes as a picture, stay with my phone number if I delete them to make room for more? And so many more. Seriously, never work in the wireless industry. It's terrible. People are stupid. Elderly people are stubborn. It's the worst kind of retail because it's tech support and retail wrapped into one terrible package of idiocy. Fast food restaurant. Incident number 1. Customer asks, "How fresh is your soda?" It comes out of a box? I guess I'll get water. Second incident. Customer asks, "Can I get a cheeseburger and no cheese?" So, a regular hamburger. No, a cheeseburger, no cheese. I gave them a regular hamburger in a cheeseburger wrapper. Worked at a fried chicken place. Lady calls and says that her daughter is going to order. Her daughter sounds about 5 years old and orders 500 pieces of chicken. I say okay, laughing. The mum gets on and asks how long. I tell her that her daughter just ordered $1,000 in food. Does she really want that? The lady goes nuts, screaming at me, asking if I think her daughter is dumb. I have to ask again, so do you want 500 pieces of chicken? My girl wants what she wants. Make it and stop making fun of her. It's going to be at least an hour and $1,000, you know that, right? She ranted something about not making fun of her and her daughter and why do I think I'm better than them and to place the order. She shows up 10 minutes after looking for her chicken. I explained to the manager about the call. She freaked out when the cashier told her it was over $1,000. The lady refused to tell us how much chicken she really wanted, while the little girl stood there screaming that she wanted 500 chickens. I work at a gas station. Hey, the bathroom door is locked. Can I get the key? There's no key. If it's locked, there's someone in there. How does it know that? How does what know what? How does the bathroom know someone's in there? People, oh my god. People go in and they lock the door while they're using it. Insert about 5 seconds of stupid face here. Oh. This was a 20 to 25-year-old guy who wasn't obviously intoxicated. What do you mean I can't bring my 6-month-old baby into the nightclub? I ran a lawn mowing service. New customer asks about the process. Do you come to my house to mow it? No, we pick up your lawn, haul it to our special mowing center and then bring it back. This was a few years back. My customer, a very chill guy, called in saying he recently bought a new MacBook Pro and it wasn't working. I asked him, "What happens when you press the power button?" He said, "I don't know where that is." I worked at Victoria's Secret, and a customer came in to return her wedding lingerie. She said she only wore it once. There were markings in the panty area and an empty contraceptive wrapper in the bag. Yes, I understand I haven't paid my credit card bill in 3 months, but why can't I use my card? Because you haven't paid your bill in 3 months. Rinse and repeat that conversation endlessly. I worked in collections, and this following conversation would happen nearly every day. But I'm in a restaurant now and they won't accept my credit card. Yeah, and that will continue to happen until you pay the minimum payment. Well, how much is that? £28. I haven't got £28, that's why I'm using the credit card, dummy. Yeah, I'm the dummy. My apologies. I worked in a heritage park in Ireland and we had a group of Viking reenactors in one weekend, putting on a really good show of crafts, games, and a trial. This American tourist came up and asked us, "Do you guys have reservations for your Vikings like we do for our Indians?" Excuse me, can you aerate that for me? It took me a couple of seconds before I aerated his juice because I was trying to understand what he meant, but I did eventually figure it out on my own. He wanted me to stir his apple juice. Technically, his word choice was applicable, I guess, but what the frick, dude? He had a straw ready in his hand and he could have damn well aerated the juice himself. I admit it took me 2 seconds of staring at his serious face before I reached for a straw, unwrapped it and stirred his drink for him, and I did it all without breaking eye contact with him, and he was satisfied. Also, I think about him now every time I stir or shake my chocolate milk to make it frothy. I used to work in IT, and one of my jobs was to support some of the security software we offered to customers. We had a package for secure data transfers, and people often had to call up to be taught how to use it. I was helping a woman use the software over the phone, and I had a remote assistance connection to her PC so I could see her screen. I said, "Okay, so find your name in the list of users." "I found it. What do I do now?" "Right-click your name and then choose Login from the menu." "Is it my right or yours?" She thought I was inside her computer screen facing out. A customer screaming, "My new car's back wiper doesn't work." We walked outside and looked at the back window. "You don't have a back wiper blade, Mom." "Okay, I'll bite. What were they pressing or trying to do to activate said back wiper? Like, were they slamming the horn or something? Were they locking and unlocking the door or jamming their finger in the cigarette lighter? There's a missing piece here that is just as fascinating as them not realizing that said appliance doesn't exist." Working at a museum where the main attraction is the dinosaur exhibit, we sell a lot of cheap products aimed at children, and we sell a lot of those. Especially these things called dino eggs. A grandfather, I presume, and his granddaughter, once again, I presume and hope, came into the shop, which was always busy and always cramped, and he picks up a dino egg for her, hands it over, pays quickly, "No bag, no need." Lovely, simple transaction. But just as the till drawer closed and I was pulling out his receipt to hand him, I've seen him in the corner of my eye tear open the packaging of his egg, smash open the lovely plastic shell, and take a big shard in his mouth. He begins to chew, turns slowly to me, and only then does he think to ask, "Is this edible?" "No," I gasped. "No, sir, that's not edible. You really shouldn't eat that." The little granddaughter's face sinks further, watching her grandpa spit out bits of plastic into her broken dinosaur egg. A fake dino egg designed to be immersed in water so that the rubbery dino toy on the inside can grow and hatch. I gave him another. Well, I gave it to his granddaughter. Best to keep it away from him. He was clearly ravenous. I'm a cashier at a grocery store, and one time I had a lady ask of me if I could tell everyone else to let her go first. Like, she expected me to force everyone who'd been patiently waiting in line to let her cut in front of them. It wasn't like she only had 1 or 2 items either. Her cart was packed. I also had a lady today ask me, the cashier, if I could run to the back of the store to get her something that she had forgotten, while I had a full line. And I told her no, and she rolled her eyes at me and gave me a dirty look. I guess it doesn't really relate all that well, but she'd rather inconvenience everyone else than take the time to get them herself. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I work in a liquor store whose inventory is 80% wine. You literally have to walk past whole aisles of wine to get to the hard liquor at the back. I was in the Scotch aisle at the back of the store when a customer approached me, looked me dead in the eyes, and asked, "Hey, where do you keep the wine here?" I took a few seconds to react, not sure if he was messing with me or not, but upon inspecting his sincerely frustrated gaze, I arrived at the conclusion that the man was indeed serious and stupid. I responded by simply pointing behind the gentleman and then sweeping my arm from one side to the other like I was showing my lion cub all of the land that would one day be his to rule. Today, a customer asked me if I was the same Harry as the Harry she spoke with yesterday. My name is not Harry, and I wear a name badge at work. I work at a small outdoor restaurant that sells wings and fries. Nothing else, just those 2 things, as far as food goes. About a week ago, a man walked up to my counter, took a menu, proceeded to read the entire thing in front of me, then put down his menu to ask, "Can I get a cheeseburger combo?" After taking a minute to wipe the WTF expression off my face, and telling him no, we only sold wings and fries, he says, what about a hot dog? Let me get a hot dog." My mind was blown after that conversation. A customer asked me, "Where's the sugar?" "What?" "I ordered sweet corn. This is just corn." Back when I did tech support, I received a call from a customer with a peculiar keyboard problem. It seemed he was having trouble with the shift key. When he typed a letter with the shift key pressed, it gave him the uppercase letter. But when he typed a number, it didn't do that. Didn't do what? Type the uppercase number. I had to break it to him gently. Working at a call center, asking people to pay their old bills. Naturally, some respond angrily. "So this is what you do all day? You just call people who haven't paid their bills?" "Yes. So if I paid my bills, you'd be out of the job?" "If everyone paid their bills, then theoretically, yes." "Haha, good. You just effed up by telling me that. I'm gonna pay my bills right away. When you're unemployed, then see how you like getting calls about your bills. The futility of eradicating a job that relies on the existence of poor people by making me poor escaped them. The following is a conversation I had 2 months ago. I'd been getting complaint after complaint all day and I was fed up. The customer asked, "What kind of company stops a customer's service because they haven't paid their bill?" "All companies do that," I said. "That's ridiculous. Don't you want me as a customer?" "Well, not if you don't pay your bills." "Well, I'm not paying it." "Then your service remains off and we'll call you and eventually pass it to a debt collection after we completely shut off your service and have you hit with the late charges." "That's fine. You aren't willing to help, obviously." "I'm willing to help, but the solution is you paying your bills." And this cycle went on for a good half an hour until they screamed at me and hung up. Not really a question, but once when I was a deli clerk, a guy came in at 9:59 p.m. and we'd closed at 9:30, so we had time to do the dishes, mop, clean slices, things like that. We were supposed to be clocked out by 10 p.m., and I was still mopping the floor, so I was already a bit behind schedule. Guy comes up to the counter and is like, "Excuse me, where's all your food?" I said, "Sorry sir, we close at 9:30. "What?" he exclaims. "You guys should stay open later. Some people have to work late and need to eat, you know." I stared at him for a moment before smiling and saying, "Yeah, I'm sorry sir, I know the feeling." He looked at me very confused, before I'm assuming it registered to him that I was still working, and he walked out in a huff. This was also a bit confusing to me because he's in a grocery store. He's literally surrounded by food, including cold tenders he can heat up in a microwave. I'm a dog groomer, not a tailor. It always confuses me when people ask, "His hair is too short. Can you just let the sides out a bit?" Ah yes, just like you can do with humans when you cut their hair too short. How do some of these people hold down jobs? Then again, using a dog groomer to begin with implies you're a trophy spouse with too much time and money. I worked on a Christmas tree farm over winter break in college. One time I had a lady ask me, "So what are these trees made out of?" I work at Jimmy John's. All Jimmy John's have a sign that says "Free Smells." I had a lady come through the drive-thru one day while me and my manager were running it. She asks about the free smells after her order, and my manager tells her, "Okay, you can pull up." She gets to the window, gets her food, and then proceeds to look through the bag. She eventually looks up, all confused, and asks where her free smells are. My manager jokingly says, "Oh yeah, come inside, and you can smell all you want for free." She then says, "Okay, butthole," and then speeds off. To this day, I have no frickin' clue what she thought would be in that bag. To the people that keep saying she probably thought it was perfume, I understand that people call perfume smells, but why would a fast food service be giving you perfume in any case? Since some people here don't get why all Jimmy John's have that sign, it's because every Jimmy John's bakes their bread fresh every morning and all throughout the day. So the whole store usually smells of fresh-baked bread. My dad used to work at Windsor Castle, built in the 11th century, home to the Queen and nearly 1,000 years old. An American tourist saw a plane flying nearby and walked over to him. "Why did they build it so close to the airport?" Spoke to the tour guide at the lodge I stay at, it's a wild game lodge, and he said he'd been asked, "Do giraffes hunt in packs? If it's October back in the USA, what month is it here?" The lodge is in South Africa. Can't seem to remember any of the others off the top of my head, but those two stuck with me. Here's a couple from my pet store. A customer wanted something for her cat. "Do you have the thing that does that thing?" "No." "Can you describe that thing?" "Well, it's for cats, and cats like it, and they get on it, and does the thing." Okay, what thing?" "You know, cat things." "Move along, please." We also sell male rodents at our store. Their family jewels are often very prominent. "Ma'am, that hamster's having a baby." "Oh, no it's not, it's a boy." "A boy is having a baby?" "No, that's his package." A customer walked into our tiny bike shop jammed packed full of bikes. Bikes are hanging in the window, off the ceilings, on the walls, all over the floor. There's not a square foot of space in the shop that isn't occupied by a bike or various parts of one. "This is the bike shop, right?" "Yes." "Do you guys sell bikes or fix them?" "Both those things." "If I bought in my canoe, could you fix it?" "Is canoe the name of your bike or is it a boat?" "It's just a canoe for the lake. Do you guys fix those?" "What? No, we're a bike shop." "Oh, okay." I work at an Italian place right now. We call our Italian menu items by Italian names with English descriptions. I get a lot of questions, but I don't mind a hair because I get paid to talk about food. Not too long ago, though, it sort of went slapstick. It's not that they asked a dumb question, but they kept asking it. "Pollo e penne?" "Oh, that's chicken and pasta with… Does it have meat in it?" The chicken pasta? Yes, pollo is Italian for chicken. Can I get the chicken but not the pollo? Pollo is just Italian for chicken. If you want chicken, it's really good. No, I like chicken, but I don't want pollo. And I kind of lost my mind for a split second. Los pollos morronos. Working at a small coffee shop that roasted their own beans and had their own brand. Do you sell Starbucks here? No, Mom, we roast our own coffee. Well, that's just bad business. Okay. I used to work at a coffee bean and tea leaf. One early morning, I had a customer order a frappuccino. I responded with, I'm sorry, we don't serve those here. Startled, the customer looks at me incredulously, then looks around themselves like they're actually seeing where they are for the first time, then looks back at me and says, This isn't a Starbucks? As a UPS driver, customers asking, What's in the package? No idea, you ordered it. I work at a hotel. A client walks in. If I book a room, does it include the bed? Like, no, sir, we only provide you with a chair so you can sit down and wait until checkout time. Worked in an AM auto parts store for a while. I got dumb questions all the time, but the one I remember the most is a guy coming in and saying, I need a sensor for my car. That's it. That's all the info he had. He didn't know what kind of car he drove or what kind of sensor he needed. And he was getting mad at me for not knowing. He wouldn't take no for an answer. Eventually, I just grabbed a random sensor and sold it to him. Never saw him again. I worked as a pharmacy tech in the US. Once had an older customer ask me why medicine was cheaper with insurance than without. He didn't understand the concept of insurance and kept saying, Oh, that's very odd. I'll have to look into this. It was for a cholesterol medication that's typically $500 for 90 pills. It wasn't a medicine with a dirt-cheap generic brand, unfortunately. Oh, there are too many to count in my job. I want phone X. Is that phone X? Yes, that's phone X. Are you sure? I look at the box that displays the image and name of phone X. Yep, that's phone X. You're sure? I'm positive. Okay, if you're sure. Another favorite one, the customer says, I'm looking for a wireless security system. I don't want to deal with cables or Wi-Fi. Will this one work? It's wireless, but it does need to connect to a network. No, it says wireless. Yes, definitely true. But it does need to connect the hub to a wireless network. No, you're not being helpful, you're wrong. Alright, have a good one. Another one I hear frequently is the customer saying, I can't get into my email and this keeps popping up. It's asking for them to sign into their email. It looks like it's asking you to sign into your email. It is, it's asking for my password. Have you tried entering your password? Oh, I'll give that a shot. Why are you watering down my coffee? Says the guy who ordered an iced Americano. I went to dinner once at a Chinese restaurant in Missouri, and a woman at the table next to ours yelled at the waiter, Where's the other sauce? We're supposed to get sweet and sour sauce, and we only got one of them. What are some recent mutations in humans that most people don't realize? Blue eyes are a very recent development, evolution-wise at least. The mutation didn't appear until about 10,000 years ago. The only one I can think of is that people are now being born without wisdom teeth. They don't serve a purpose other than an excuse for dentists to make more money. I'm one of these. I always thought my rearmost molars were my wisdom teeth, so I went to my dentist once and asked about having them removed before they started to hurt as opposed to after. She looked at my x-rays and said, Well, you were born without wisdom teeth. Congrats, you're fully evolved. Lactose tolerance. Humans didn't really drink milk past infancy. But when people started herding goats and cows, they started drinking the milk. A lot of people couldn't handle it, but there were always select people that could. So that explains why some people are hereditarily lactose intolerant and some aren't. The gene is still totally random, but like other genes, it can become more prevalent through surviving cheeseheads. Having 4 kidneys. I'm not sure if this is actually a thing, but I've kept seeing mentions of it every now and then, and this article claims a whole 1% of the British population have them, although often with complications involved. If you open your hand with your palm up, touch your pinky and your thumb together, and then bend your wrist upwards, some will see an extra tendon or muscle, and some won't. From what I understand, it's something that we're losing that our ancestors had probably millions of years ago that we no longer need. Stan Lee did a show on people with real-life superhuman abilities. There's some mutations that most people don't realize. Some examples of mutations like this include Dean Karnazes, who doesn't build up lactic acid in his muscles, so he never experiences muscle pain. He has the record for longest distance ever run in one go, 560 kilometers. He only really stopped because he needed to sleep. There was Rajmohan Nair. His skin is extremely resistant to electricity. He can be shocked by 30 times what would normally kill a person, and it's like a 9-volt battery to him. There's Dennis Rogers, pound for pound, strongest man in the world. He has a mutation where the burst strength of his muscles is insanely above and beyond standards. He can roll fry pans, but the thing is, he doesn't even look huge, just standard. The lesser X-Men of the world. It's very cool anyway. I do think there are some physical trade-offs to some of these though, like repetitive strain injury from not feeling lactic acid and running 560 kilometers. Or your bones and tissue not being able to support the massive forces your muscles are exerting. I'd be interested if there were any weird injuries in these people's futures. Little toes are getting smaller in humans as the need for them is non-existent. Other than finding furniture in the dark, they're great at that. The ability to sneeze when looking at bright lights. It's like a superpower that only a few of us have. One day when things seem hopeless, humanity is at its darkest point and the world needs us the most, we, who are so brutally shunned for our differences, will take the burdens of the normal people upon our backs, stand tall and proud and look up at the heavens, and proceed to sneeze because it's a sunny day. The hunter's response. Most people, when they're in cold weather for long periods of time, will have the blood vessels in their extremities constrict. This reduces heat loss by keeping most of the warm blood around your core. If you have the hunter's response, every few hours or so of cold, your blood vessels will open back up again for a few minutes, which will warm up your extremities and help prevent frostbite. It's relatively common in people of European descent. Lactose tolerance into adulthood is pretty recent, I've heard. Pretty much as recent as the wheel. Kind of wild to think about. Crab people. They look like crabs, but talk like people. It's not extremely recent, but many people in Africa who were diagnosed with sickle cell anemia were also found to be immune to malaria. Alcohol dehydrogenase, which helps breaking down alcohol into acetaldehyde, has a much more efficient version in East Asians, meaning they have the potential to hold their liquor better, and a slightly less functional enzyme degrading acetaldehyde. The accumulation of it makes them appear very flushed when they drink. This improved alcohol dehydrogenase allele seems to have been affected by a strong positive selection roughly matching the time when rice culture, and presumably rice alcohol, became common in Asia, between 10,000 to 7,000 years ago. Most people probably already realize this, but our average height is increasing, probably due to selection, i.e. people tend to be more willing to mate with taller people because taller is often assumed to be better. It is believed that until 3,000 to 5,000 years ago, humans could either not see the color blue or couldn't really distinguish it from green. As mentioned, blue eyes are a mutation and have only been around for about 10,000 years, and everyone with blue eyes descends from one specific person. People's grasp on evolution is pretty bad. This group has some laughable examples of terrible understandings of genetics and evolution. Muscle growth. I'm sure the buffest guy 2,000 years ago isn't even close to some of the guys now in both size and testosterone levels. I'm willing to bet nutrition has a bigger role to play in this than genetics. Testosterone levels are actually rapidly dropping. The dry gene developed in the Siberian area just before these people crossed the Bering Strait to the Americas. Now, some East Asians and virtually all Native Americans have dry earwax and sweat very little. Bonus fact, it is a recessive gene, so if you're dry, then that means you're Asian or Native American on both sides. Alright, to reduce some confusion, an individual of any regional or racial population can carry this gene, but that individual is necessarily a descendant of the group of ancient Asians in whom the mutation occurred and who spread from what is now Siberia. Any individual who carries the dry gene is of Native American or East Asian descent, regardless of how far removed that ancestor is. The vast majority of Native Americans carry this gene, and some East Asians still carry it as well. Also, many people are asking about the sweat and earwax thing. People who exhibit the dry phenotype do not sweat profusely, sometimes even when their bodies are very hot, creating lots of heat. Sweat does occur, and rarely it can be profuse. Sweating is not triggered easily. My mum, brother, and I all exhibit the dry phenotype, and none of us have ever really had smelly BO armpits. My dad is only a carrier, and he has wet earwax and he sweats, and he sometimes has smelly armpits, but not very much. So the presence or lack of armpit BO might be a clue if you're not sure if you have the gene. That's just anecdotal, but maybe it's interesting or helpful to some. If you have dry earwax, then it's flaky and crusty or crumbly, and sometimes hard. It's not sticky or moist. It's not like wax anymore. Hope that's helpful. About a third of people, including me, are born without wisdom teeth. We don't need them anymore, so we're gradually phasing them out as a species. The increase in people with nut allergies. Oh, so that's why girls run away from me. No, just to clarify, it isn't fully genetic or environmental, although a lack of exposure does make people who wouldn't have had it get it. But if we just gave everyone tree nuts, some kids would never get used to it and they would die. Wasn't there something like 10 years ago about bone density? A girl in a car accident here in the US led to a big study. She has higher than normal bone density due to some mutation related to the LDL receptor. Sickle cell disease is a blessing or a curse. It has negative drawbacks, but makes you completely immune to the disease that kills millions each year: malaria. Sweat that's slightly more acidic than normal. Okay, so there are supervillains in training now that can, over a process of decades, wipe their sweat on prison bars and very gradually escape the first set of things keeping them inside. Terrifying. Also, I am seeing a lot of the same answers cropping up. I'll try to scatter through the few remaining original mutations, but there are a few thousand answers to skim through here. So if I see a repeated one but with an interesting tidbit attached on, then I'll include that too. I read that some people have a larger spleen that can make them go without oxygen for longer times than other normal humans. I think it was tested, and I could be wrong here, on freedivers and those people who lived for generations freediving for mussels and fish and such. The ability to see the color blue. This is a relatively recent evolutionary trait. Not many creatures can see the color. Birds are one, which is why you see some birds that decorate their nests with blue things they find. It stands out to other birds, and doesn't put them in danger since predators can't see it. This also explains why blue and gray colorblind is somewhat common in people. Since it's a new gene, it's still getting all the kinks worked out, so to speak. Not all people are born with wisdom teeth. Many, like me, are born with them only on one side, and a lucky few are born completely without them. Tetrachromacy. They have a fourth color cone in their eye and can detect variations in color much more precisely than the normal trichromat human eye. Native Tibetan women have a mutation which allows them to carry babies to term in extremely low oxygen conditions. China discovered this when they took over Tibet and started trying to colonize it. When they bought their own Han wives, they had something like a 90% rate of the babies just not making it, while the Tibetan women were fine. 12-year-old girls looking like they're 18. Our brains have been getting smaller since around 30,000 years ago. Only the cerebellum, the area primarily responsible for precise muscle movements, is getting bigger. Mutations are the result of Zinch, foul heresy. Smartphone pinky. Look at your right pinky. Chances are there's a divot from you holding your phone there. People are certainly living longer, not just in terms of lifespan, but they seem to grow old much later than usual. That might just be medicine's fault, though. I don't have a source and I'm on mobile, so take it with a grain of salt, but I heard within the next 400 to 600 years, humans will have poisonous bite. After a quick Google search, it seems that human saliva contains cytokinase, which cause irritation but are not venomous in humans. This could be an evolutionary precursor to venom or an antibacterial agent. However, it would take significantly longer than a few hundred years to develop into full-blown venom. The Sherpa's ability to breathe at high altitudes. Obesity. It's an adjustment to our changing environment and socioeconomics. It's not evolution or mutation, though. I mean, fat cells would be. It's our body's ability to store excess food energy in our bodies. It's an evolutionary mechanism that all animals have. It allows for thermal insulation as well as energy storage for when food sources are scarce. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm not sure if it's evolution, but a small amount of people, including me, can control their eustachian tube. I can equalize pressure and hear my own heartbeat by opening them. And if I breathe in quickly through my nose with them open and close them suddenly, I can create a pressure difference that lowers my sensitivity to sounds. Very useful in a loud environment. White skin, blue eyes, blonde hair, lactose tolerance, human immunodeficiency virus immunity. Why are Europeans so mutated? The phasing out of our appendix. We no longer dine on raw vegetables, fruits, seeds, or grains as a part of our primary diet. The appendix was responsible for the acid created to break down this food supply. Everyone's butthole has gotten progressively wider and wider. Not sure if it counts, but nearsightedness has been shooting way up lately. After effects from everyone staring at those old CRTs for 20 to 30 years before LCD was the main thing would probably be a large amount of those cases. It wasn't until the same time as people were developing blue eyes that people could properly digest dairy from other species other than human after a few months. A third strand of DNA. The stupidity of the newer generations. No, that's just you. I don't know about anyone else, but you know how everyone has those swirly things on their fingers that make fingerprints? I have a sixth one, about halfway in between the bottom of my pinky and my wrist on my right hand. Kinda weird. Some, mind you, very few individuals have developed the ability to merge into the right lane when driving slow. And half of those don't even know how to indicate properly when they change. Now that is a truly remarkable recent evolution. And now we present some first-hand accounts of strange genetic traits. A guy I used to work with was missing the exterior of his right ear. He just had his ear canal flat on his head. It didn't even look that weird. The guy was extremely handsome and he didn't hide it. But his hair would sometimes cover it. He was just as beautiful either way. He was just born like that, and is slightly hearing impaired, but he makes an effort to listen to you and pay attention. Awesome guy all around who jokes that he's lucky he doesn't need glasses. Yet. I met someone who had coloboma. His pupils made his eyes look like those of a snake. A boy I went to elementary school with had webbed hands and feet, and one of his pinkies was much shorter than the others, like about half size. He eventually had surgery to remove the webbing. It worked, but he had scarring on all of his fingers and toes that wasn't particularly comfortable at first. A friend of mine and his dad donated blood together for the first time and got their blood type cards in the mail. Dad had AB blood and son was type O. Now, people with type AB blood, as a rule, can't have children with type O blood. So they might have assumed the worst off the bat, but fortunately they'd done one of those family ancestry tests some time before, and it showed they shared 50% of their DNA and listed them as father and son. So they were confused. One of the tests had to be wrong, right? Wrong. Both blood tests and ancestry tests were both right. Some further testing showed the father had a rare genetic mutation known as CISAB, and people with this mutation can have children with type O blood. My 11-year-old son is a chimera. He absorbed his non-viable twin brother in utero and has 2 sets of DNA. This possibility was discovered by CVS, or chorionic villus sampling, which was recommended to me because my blood test results were abnormal. Postnatal PCR testing confirmed the chimerism. We don't know which cells have which set of DNA. For example, his liver can have his own set of DNA and his skin his twins. He has no outwardly visible signs of chimerism, but is ambidextrous, which is common in human chimeras. Chimerism doesn't cause health problems. If diagnosed, it could cause false negatives in paternity testing. My son just thinks it's cool that he's his own twin. I had a student who had a spider hand, like 8 fingers on the one hand and 4 mirrored. It was cool, but he sucked at typing. I met a guy with 2 pupils in one eye on a train like 6 years ago. My mother had 2.5 kidneys. My son has a genetic mutation that's essentially a mirror image of the mutation that causes some people to feel no pain. Those people have a loss of function mutation. He has a gain of function. So in his case, instead of being able to walk through fire and feel nothing, he feels fire when doing things as minor as putting on socks. His genes, and those of others like him, and the genes of the pain-free cohort, are being studied as targets for a new generation of non-opioid pain medications. He's had a difficult journey for sure, but luckily we found ways to help with environmental controls and other accommodations, and right now he's actually doing really well. I saw a girl born without eyes once. It was under circumstances where asking questions would have been inappropriate, so I still wonder. She seemed otherwise quite normal. 15th chromosome deletion, 9th chromosome duplication. Apparently there are only 25 known cases in the world. It's so rare it doesn't have a name. Completely dependent on 24/7 care and modern medicine to keep her alive. I met her several years ago, and at the time she had survived longer than the average for that condition. In myself and my biological father, we share a mutation that gives us abnormally high bone density. Normally, high bone mass is a feature of some bad medical conditions, but in our case it seems to just genuinely be super dense bones. My best friend can hear dog whistles due to some mutation in her ears. She can make out a conversation across the din and space of a crowded restaurant. The story of two girlfriends. One was an albino girl, amazing looking, white hair, skin so white that it was pink due to the blood vessels underneath, eyes so pale they were almost white. She wasn't a nice person after all, but amazing looking. Few years later, had a girlfriend who was born with no fingernails. She was an advanced piano player. Good on her, I say. I knew a kid in school who had 12 fingers. He had an extra fully functioning pinky on each hand. It's interesting that it was definitely a pinky and not some other random finger, and he definitely had 2 pinkies on each hand, not 2 ring fingers and then a pinky. They seemed to work fine and didn't cause him any discomfort. When he showed me his hands, I asked him if the pinkies worked. Sorry, I was also a kid. And he said yes. Then he wiggled all of his fingers and they moved normally. We'd been sitting next to each other for 10 to 15 minutes in art class at the same table, and I didn't even notice his hands because all of his fingers looked normal and had all the knuckles and nails and stuff. He didn't struggle with holding a pencil either. Writing and sketching was as good as you could expect some 10 to 11-year-olds. I hope he grew up to play piano or guitar. I do wonder how some of these pass on to future generations. I guess some are recessive or dominant, so my guess is as good as anyone's. Pretty cool that they were all fully functional digits, though. I wonder if that unlocked any weird functionality. My paternal grandma had violet eyes. They were incredible to look at, and I can only imagine how many men were tripping over themselves when she was a young woman because she had jet black hair. I think she was basically Yennefer of Vengerberg. She was so unique because her mum was Swedish and her dad was German, and I don't think any of her 5 siblings had eyes like that. My brother has a mirror image heart. It's healthy and causes him no issues, but it is on the wrong side. This isn't exactly a mutation, but when my friend was pregnant, she started to notice this lump sort of next to her groin. She was pretty worried about it and showed it to me. It was just a squishy lump, not a cyst or anything. She went to the doctors and had some tests. It turned out to be an ectopic chest tissue, which can apparently form anywhere on a line from the armpits to the groin. I thought this was really cool, and apparently so did her doctor, who called her into the office to discuss her test results, which they normally only do when it's something bad. He asked because he'd never seen it and was just curious. Trisomy 13. Born without eyes, with extra toes and missing fingers. The doctors estimated that this person would not make it to their first birthday. They actually died at 13 years, 8 months old. Hypertrichosis, or werewolf syndrome. The man's face was fully covered in hair. A condition called xeroderma pigmentosum, where the person's body is physically incapable of repairing damage caused by sunlight, or UV rays. He was born in October and kept mostly inside a very cloudy part of the world, so it wasn't discovered until he was roughly 6 months old and went to the park for the first time and just got third-degree burns all over his body from just 15 minutes in the sun, literally. It's an incredibly rare disorder with a significantly shortened lifespan. There are multiple versions of the disorder, and he happens to have the worst and the rarest one, which also affects his brain. He has neural degeneration, and they don't fully understand why, but it has something to do with his brain cells also not being able to repair stuff. He also can't ever inhale smoke because his internal tissue can't repair either, so if he does inhale smoke, he gets really significant lung damage and could literally die from it. He has to wear specialist gear made by actual NASA to ever go outside. NASA makes and donates this kind of gear regularly for people who have this disorder. He has to have special tinting on the windows at home and in cars and special air filtration systems and whatnot. He has a permanent one-to-one aide at school so that the adults can watch out for his safety 100% of the time. It's expected he won't make it to his 20th birthday. He'll be lucky if he can make it through high school. When I was a kid, my mum and I were on the tram and she got chatting to the parents of a baby sitting across from us. I was interacting with the baby, playing peekaboo and making faces, but when she copied me putting her hands to her face, I noticed she had 6 fingers on one hand and extra nubs of flesh on the outside of both, next to her little fingers. My mum explained later that she was a polydactyl, and that the nubs of flesh were rudimentary extra fingers that weren't fully developed in the womb. She also said she was glad I hadn't made a fuss about it because although I hadn't noticed, the parents were obviously concerned I'd be grossed out. Then she had to explain why they were worried because I thought she was beautiful and that her condition was fascinating, and I couldn't imagine why anyone would be cruel about it. Now I think about it, that encounter was probably the first inkling that I was interested in childcare. I felt such an intense desire to look after that baby and any other that might be treated badly because of a disability or difference. My brother has iris columba. Basically, one of his irises look like it's leaking out of his eye. It doesn't affect his vision at all. I worked with a woman years ago who was born without one or both thumbs. I can't remember. Anyway, they rotated her index fingers around to function as thumbs when she was a baby. She said her grandmother had the same condition and always felt so guilty that she had passed it on. When did a nosy parent regret seeing what their teenager got up to? My son has a towel for a specific private purpose, and it needs to be washed. Ugh. My mum found my rear-end plug tail on the bathroom counter. I'd washed it and forgotten it there. She was crying laughing as she just threw it at me. Well, at least you washed it. As a kid, it seemed like no matter where you hid stuff, your mother would find it. I had a nice stash of adult mags when I was a young teen and decided I would hide them in one of my guitar cases. Actually, behind the guitar. My mother would have had absolutely no reason whatsoever to open one of those. She still found them and acted like she wasn't looking for anything. I raised a daughter as a single father, and I am not a natural snoop. I try not to be too nosy. The worst part for me was having her around my mum. My mum is nosy. She's more nosy than any 5 people I've ever met. My mum was left alone in my house with just the dog when my daughter was 15. My daughter is now in her mid-20s, and I still haven't heard the last from my own mother about my daughter having 3 different vibrating toys and therefore being some kind of sick prevert. She hasn't lived at home since she left for college at 18, and I'm still hearing about it from my mum. My mum walking in on me doing a 2-handed lubricated pickle tickle. The headphones I had on were loud enough to block out the door opening sound, but not her scream. I should probably mention it was also her lubricant. I love that her reaction was to scream. Why wouldn't she just let out a sigh and close the door? That's what I'd do. When we moved house and all of the stuff was in the new place, one of the moving guys called me out to double-check the receipt, and when we were out of my mum's earshot and eyeline, he handed me the green herb pipe that had fallen out of the hidey hole in the back of my desk when they were moving it. What a bro. I found a doo-doo-covered, eggplant-shaped adult toy hidden in the now unused floor vent in the bathroom. I lived with my mum and 4 younger brothers. It doesn't matter whose it was, I'm still wishing I'd never seen that. I think I would prefer to believe that one of my brothers was gay or straight and liked butt stuff and was just also kind of a slob, than believe that my mum had really just given up on household hygiene to that level. No matter who it was, I'm unhappy for everyone with that decision though. The lack of hygiene, the lack of discretion, and the disrespect to the bathroom. Gross. I had a Dragon brand, eggplant-sized adult toy in a specially made container that looked like a pillow. My mum still found it. I'm a guy, she's Mormon. That was an intense conversation. I'm not a parent, but a snooping child. I found a box of my mum's toys and lubricant. In a different drawer, I found a photo of my dad undressed in the shower. My dad had died several years prior to my snooping discovery. The only time my mum ever searched my computer history was 10 minutes after I'd Googled what queefs were. I was playing a game of Scrabble with my mum and a friend, and one of us played that same word. We then got the pleasure of explaining what it was to my mum. She was so excited about the new word, she went to work that night and made sure everyone else knew it too. My dad once found a prawn-to-graphic image, as in a huge eggplant in a girl's butt, canine style, as my desktop wallpaper because I thought it would be better to crank it that way. Oh. My mum cleaned my room, totally not to snoop or anything, and found my toys when I was 18. Serves her right. The toys were really well hidden. She had to dig to find those things. I think what we can take away most is that there are no parents writing on their accounts here. It's just a bunch of teenagers caught whacking the mule in some way. This happened a couple of years ago when I still lived with my mum and stepdad. My stepsister used to live in my room, and it had been nearly a year since she moved out. I had a vibrating toy that my best friend had bought me as a joke, but not really a joke, for a birthday gift. I used it frequently and would hide it in the bottom of a drawer in my closet, hidden in a hat. And my mum decided to snoop and found it, but somehow thought it was my stepsister's and kept it. I asked her about it, and she was blown away by the fact that sometimes I liked to have fun with myself, but she was going to send the toy in the mail back to my sister without telling her. Now, that would have been a hilarious disaster. In short, my mum almost sent my toy to my sister in the mail. Oh, update. I texted her about it and she had the typical response like, "Not my daughter." And yes, I did get it back, but I soon threw it out because the thought of my mum knowing that I used it was too much. I have a younger brother. I went to his room to search something up on the internet and he had left his tabs open. Apparently he likes wincest, although I wouldn't say there was anything winning about that. My 12-year-old stepson's group chat on his iPhone, entitled "Sarah Suck Big," well, you know where this is going. I was cleaning my 7-year-old's room because it was a frickin' mess and I was sick of it. I found a collection of apple cores, orange peels, and candy wrappers stashed under the bed. Some had been there for far too long. Back in high school, my friend Allie's house was right next to our campus. I wasn't allowed to go hang out after school, though. No boys were, unless her mother was home. Why? Because her mum had walked in on Allie going south of the border on a guy in the basement one day. The only reason I actually know this story is because one day I was there with parental supervision, and when Mum has to leave for errands, she said, "Well, I wish I could leave you guys here alone, but I guess Allie really blew that chance." I have never seen a teenager turn that red. I was a preteen at the time the internet was starting to get going. My parents saw my search history after I became confused how doing the deed worked in a gay relationship, and I googled it. That led to some interesting questions. Not a parent, but when my brother was 7, he was complaining of my mum's PC running slowly. Out of curiosity, I checked history in case he downloaded any viruses. Minecraft adult films were multiple of the searches. Yeah, I wish I was kidding. So I have a bunch of weird sleep issues, and one of them is the ability to hold conversations with people while I'm in a deep sleep. I have no memory of the conversations. My mum found out about this when I was a teenager, and apparently she'd sneak into my room in the middle of the night, and Sleep Me would just dish out all the hot goss. Who was having a party, who I liked, which of my friends made bad life choices, everything. She'd never punish me for it, but would give me advice based on what Sleep Me confessed. It always confused me on how much she knew about my life. When I'm extra tired or stressed, this does come back, and apparently I've had hilarious conversations with my husband. I've just recently discovered that I've passed this trait down to my son. Part of me is tempted to get the scoop from my kid, but another part of me wants to respect his personal space. I'm a parent, so one weekend my wife and I are chilling out in bed watching whatever garbage on TV, when our youngest son, of 11, comes in and says his older brother, 13, is looking at prawn topography on his tablet. So we call for the eldest son. He denies and denies, of course, so we tell him to bring me his tablet. He hasn't learned the art of incognito browsing or clearing history completely. Going through his history, well, I'll be damned, he is looking at some wild prawns. Not just your regular crustaceans, though. There's some anime stuff, some real adult raunchy stuff, but the real kicker here was the Scooby-Doo shellfish. Fred railing Velma, Shaggy taking Daphne to town, Velma whipping out the old scissors with Daphne. So, Mum leaves the room to let Dad and his son talk about this. It starts with the usual, "Don't lie, you can't hide this stuff from me if I go through your browsing history. It's okay to tickle your pickle, in private of course, you're growing up, yada yada yada." And then I finish the conversation, give him his tablet back, but as he's walking out the door, I can't help but do my best Scooby-Doo impression. "But Raggy," followed by "Zoinks, jinkies," and "Ruh-roh, found your prawns." His face got so red and I just lost it. I was in tears. Now, every so often, when he starts to cop an attitude with us, I just go "Zoinks" to him. Kicker of it all, the youngest son comes into the room later with, "I was only joking, I didn't really know he really was doing that." Classic younger brother behavior, to be honest. Oh my god, and you, Dad? "Ruh-roh, Raggy." Well, at least you managed to turn what would have been a traumatizing experience for both of you into one that was completely one-sided and only scarred your son for life. Well done, Dad. My son's Japanese tentacular spectacular cartoon whoopee collection. I need eye bleach. Not a parent, but a witness to their finding something they didn't want to see. I work IT. A guy had his adult daughter's computer that was having issues opening some photo application and needed it fixed. As we were going through and checking if it worked yet, I opened up the app and presented an image of his daughter undressed holding a big old marital aid. No words were exchanged. He closed the lid and left. I once found a sock that would not only stand on its own, but could be used to prop a window open. I would have sat the kid down for a conversation, but I don't have kids. I also have an uneven number of socks now. Ugh. My daughter's boyfriend left his contraceptive wrappers in her bathroom trash can, twice. It was a magnum, both times. I'm very glad they're using double protection. She's also on birth control and they were both virgins. But gosh darn, I hate this. I was taking out her trash, dumping the small trash can into the large bag as one is wont to do in the house with 4 frickin' women. Well, at least he's got a magnum dong. I was helping my recently turned teen cousin with a PC problem. I know his dad has some controls set, so I did a little snooping to see how effective they were. Apparently the kids discovered Futanari and the regular tentacly Asian stuff. He likes the classics. Black Bible was searched for a lot. I didn't tell his dad, but I did Purell the F out of my hands. Parents, why do you feel the need to go through your teen's stuff? My mum always went through my stuff. I never had anything to hide, but it always made me feel untrusted, and it made me feel the need to hide stuff from her in the first place. Even if it was something small like a date or a birthday card from a friend. Just let your teens have a safe place in their room where they can keep stuff that they feel is private. If you have any worries about substances or other things, be honest and open with them. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was 16, I had green herb duct-taped to the ceiling of my blocked-off air vent in my room, inside a smell-proof case, and my mum still managed to find it. She searched the frickin' air vents. Protection wrapper in the downstairs trash, rolled up inside a potato chip bag. Found it. Lighter tucked underneath the seat in my car. Found it. Plastic bag full of empty beer cans that I hid at the bottom of our outdoor trash can. Found that. She loves me, but she was nosy as F and always on my case because she came from a very well-to-do family. Imagine how psyched she was when I came home on leave for the first time with a tattoo and a nicotine habit. My mum found a thing saying I was bi and confronted me while crying about it and begging me to tell her why I'd turned away from God. 6 years later and I'm still so far in the closet I may as well rule Narnia. Also, she found my Yowie stash when I was a frickin' weeb. On my 16th birthday, my girlfriend at the time was over and we were in my room watching a movie, just chillin'. I went downstairs at a point during the night to leave the girlfriend in the room to get a drink of water. Whilst down the stairs, my mum asks me if I had any laundry to be done. This wouldn't be strange for most 16-year-old guys, but I'd been doing my own laundry since I was 14 due to my parents regularly being away for days at a time for work. I was confused, but just replied, "No, I did some yesterday. I'm checking anyway." So she did. I got my glass of water, and one for the girlfriend, and started my path back to my room when 2 shrill screams came from that direction. I ran to the door, and my mother storms out, eyes on the ground, and grumbles, "I'm never going into your fricking room again." I enter the room, perplexed, only to find my girlfriend wrapped in a bedsheet on the bed, her clothes strewn on the ground. She had been sat on the edge of the bed with nothing on whatsoever when my mum walked in. The night was ruined, and my mother never entered my room again. I'm sure she regrets being such a nosy fool. You know the word flashlight? Well, replace the letter A in that word with an E in the next sentence. I found a small bag of green herb stuffed in the bottom of his flashlight. A friend of mine once set the homepage on his dad's work computer to a prawn site. You know, those viruses that automatically set themselves. His dad got greeted with a large woman enjoying a zucchini in a very unconventional way next time he opened his browser at work. He was not pleased, but the IT guy who had to take care of it must have had a good laugh. To clarify, my friend did it accidentally. He actually removed the Internet Explorer shortcut to try to hide it. Neither of my parents seem to be nosy, but I have had some interesting moments. Like at one point, my dad wanted me to look at something on the web and saw I had Medina Arabic on the bookmark tab, and naturally his first response was, "Are you trying to join the terror fighters?" I'm just really into languages, something that apparently my family finds really weird. My stepdad tracks not only my phone but also my bank account, so almost everything. He tried to track what I do on the computer, but I'm more tech-savvy than he is. I'm pretty sure my mum wasn't too happy finding my stash of diapers. She did know about it, but I still got looks after she clearly went through my room for who knows what reason. I wish I hadn't found my own teenage diary hidden in my teenage daughter's room. I'm always terrified that my parents will go through the various papers I have in my room and find the tests that I didn't do as well as they would have wanted me to do. Went to take a whiz in a stall at school, found a cell phone on the TP dispenser. It didn't have a lock screen. I thought I'd search in the contacts for someone the owner spoke to regularly, like mum or whoever, to send them a text, like found your son's phone. It'll be with campus security. As soon as I swiped to unlock, it opened to a Google image search for Randy she-mails. I wiped the browser history, turned it into security, and went about my day like nothing had happened. It was at that moment that I realized how numb I was to odd stuff. I mean, I feel like you could have still sent a message saying it was with security, but then I guess you just wanted to eradicate any chance of ever having to run into anyone who had anything to do with the things you saw on that device. Oh well. I wish my mother hadn't found the letters, located in a hidden drawer from my first girlfriend. Getting home one day to find my mother standing there proclaiming my girlfriend to be an utter harlot was more insight into my life than I wanted her to have. In fairness to my mother, her judgment was spot on, but at the same time she had failed to realize that was why I liked her. Daughter had a phone issue. I looked at the search history on the browser and regretted everything. When I was in the 9th grade one Saturday morning, I'd gotten up at like 7:30 a.m. and went into the computer room and was no joke just watching porno. A black guy and a white girl, and my dad came in while I was just watching it. It was awful. Okay, but what about the reverse, because I found my mum's vibrating toy, bubbler, and stash of green herb that she apparently grew in our backyard. Look, I wasn't even being nosy, okay? Our family shares an Apple Cloud account, and when looking through apps that people had downloaded, I found one about different bedroom positions. My oldest kid at the time was around 12. Another reverse situation. I found an uncomfortably large, vibrating toy in my mum's room once when I was looking for candy, which she often hoarded. Oh, and it wasn't the cheap kind of toy either. They didn't spare any realism when they made that thing. Even worse, I thought it was a flashlight. You can imagine my surprise when the flashlight had veins, but of course, the most traumatizing part was when I pressed the button and instead of illuminating the drawer, it vibrated intensely. Took me half an hour to find out how to turn it off. My piece of crap brother-in-law would try to catch me doing stuff. My sister is much older than me, so I'd stay with them sometimes in the summer when I was a kid. He showed me his new computer and then said, "Don't give anyone my AOL password," and just left me alone for a day while I worked. I was 12 years old with free reign to the internet. He came home with a preverted grin on his fat face. "Did you know that I can see what websites you've been to today?" "Oh, I can." He sat down at his computer, fired up the history with a glint in his dead, piggy eyes, and, well, he saw 12 hours of me doing two things: reading about Animorphs and Star Trek, and chatting about Animorphs and Star Trek. I snooped on my kid's Reddit account. He has more karma than I do. Grr. I caught my 7-year-old watching adult flicks on his tablet. Electronics were taken, the birds and the bees talk was had. Not a parent, but my mum taught me how to wash my clothes at 6. She honestly hated doing the laundry that much. For my birthday once, I turned down her offer of $100 in exchange for doing my own laundry and told her to just instead keep doing mine, adding that it didn't appeal to me that much. She still wouldn't do it and left the Benjamin in my coat pocket. Being a late bloomer, I took home a girl to meet my parents and did the deed for the first time at 21 in their basement, as many young men do. Not wanting her to find the contraceptive in the garbage can, I emptied the rubber and pocketed it. I then changed clothes so I wouldn't smell like one does after a sweaty roll on the downstairs carpet, and, well, you guessed it, 90 minutes later I see my mum folding my clothes. I say, "You're doing my laundry," for the first time in 15 years. "And of course you checked the pockets, didn't you?" She folded quietly, looking down, and said, "Yes, Paul, I found the Johnny. 8 years ago, and that was, and likely always will be, the last time my mother did my laundry." Not me, but my family friend was looking through her daughter's phone without her permission. 2 minutes after I told her that she shouldn't do that, she found out her daughter had been on a lesbian chat site and burst into tears. Should have minded her own damn business. Parent here, it's not what I found, but what I didn't find. All of my son's friends are a couple of years older than him. A few years ago, every one of them got busted with pornography except mine. All the parents, myself included, joke that he's probably the one that introduced them to it. He's just better at hiding it. That, and I don't search his internet history. In high school, I bought a pipe for the smoking of ye old wacky tobacco. It went missing days afterwards, so naturally I was panicked. I searched the house top to bottom and asked my brother, who was 12, if he had it. His answer was no, and it sent me into a panicked loop of searching the house, and re-asking my brother. I'd written it off until a month later when I heard a commotion from my brother's room. My father found the pipe and my brother claimed it was mine. My father stormed down the hall and woke me up with the "Is this your hash pipe?" spiel. I had to stifle a laugh, first time I'd even heard the word hash used as a substance name, and told him, "Nope, never seen that before." He went down the hall and proceeded to kick the crap out of my brother for smoking and lying. Still to this day, I have a smile on my face telling this story. Worst part is, I don't think he ever got to smoke anything out of that pipe, he just liked stealing things. I found a $100 bill in my daughter's jacket pocket. She was 3 at the time. I did find gay adult images in a rectory, that place where Catholic priests live. My Boy Scout troop was connected to my church, and our priest, who's a stand-up guy, asked us to clean out some of the spare bedrooms that weren't occupied anymore. This place was a frickin' mansion, so they needed all the free labor they could get with cleaning. Digging through one of the closets there, I happened upon a metric crap ton of gay prawns. They weren't magazines though, they were slides, like old-school slides for a Kodak carousel projector. Me, being a naive but not ignorant of how messed up the church is, 12-year-old at the time, I thought that there could be potentially some less than legal crustaceans in the mix. So I stupidly took it upon myself to look at every single slide to make sure I didn't have to go to the police. I tossed that crap in a dumpster and never mentioned it again. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.